So let me just introduce it with this. Why did we go? The reason why we went is because for years, Providence Church has had a desire, as we've planted churches. We've planted 14, 15 churches, both here and internationally. And one of the things that we've always struggled with is, there's this statistic. There's about 1,000 unreached people groups that are still out there. Of course, Jesus said that when the gospel is heard in every nation or people group, ethne, then the end will come. And so for us, we know that passage, we can be a part. Actually, Christians can be a part in bringing Christ back, because if we're sharing the gospel to places that haven't heard the gospel, that haven't heard the good news, then we're being a part of bringing Jesus back. But not just for that, because the gospel is the answer. It's the answer to everything. It's how people find satisfaction when nothing else satisfies. It's how governments have a rock whereby people actually obey the law. People actually desire good, not just for themselves but for others. People can be trusted. People will tell the truth in court. People will, do what's right if God lives inside, if they're driven by Christ. And we know this historically. We know this. There's too many ways to talk about this. So the gospel's the answer. He's the answer to poverty. He's the answer to diseases. The gospel is the answer. And I'm not going to go in detail on that, but just to say that I know I'm certainly in a friendly crowd here, but as elders of Providence, when we're talking about sharing the gospel, and we do that, we're an evangelistic church, meaning we want to share the gospel with people in our culture and have an environment at Providence Church where the gospel can be known by people, and we want to encourage people to invite their friends, and we encourage people to have an influence on their friends. But then when it comes to planting churches, we want to plant churches that do the same, locally and internationally. Internationally, we've done that in underreached areas, but we've never done that in an unreached area. So the quest began about 5 or 6, 7 years ago when we went to Nepal. Jesse and Madison and I. That actually was preceded by just praying about where God was opening the door for us to take the gospel to places where it hadn't heard. Bhutan was kind of on our radar because God had brought us Madison. And for a lot of reasons, we sensed that the time wasn't now. Like the door wasn't open for that. And that took a long trip and a lot of research. In fact, Madison's still there, and we still got a relationship with him, and we're still, that's still a bait that's in the water. There's still, the bobber's in the water, and we're just kind of waiting for that to hit. In fact, I think the Hoyts will be going sometime to check that out again for us. So we kind of weren't back at square one, but we were back to what are we going to do? Where are we going to go? And Joshua Project was one thing that was going on a few years ago that was talking about where all the people groups are that have not been reached. There's a lot of them in Africa. One of the hard things about Africa is it's just so hard to get there, and the cultural and danger quotients are extremely difficult, and so that's always a deterrent. So Africa was there. We talked about it several times, but then it seemed like there wasn't a door that opened until Carol Ward comes to town and started meeting with, and this is probably 5 years ago, started meeting with people. And some people in our church got in touch, a small group in our church had heard a small group. I think, Mom, it was your small group, right? And so they heard about heard her story. I started hearing from that small group, and then I heard from some other people who actually met Carol Ward through business connections and other stuff. It was just interesting that all of a sudden, from a lot of different sides, we started hearing about Carol Ward. Some of the things that I first heard about her, I'm thinking, she sounds a little crazy to me. And so being one that we really have to check these things out, I did a lot of research about her, talked to her. Jesse at the time was our missions guy. Jesse's going, and Laney was also a staff member that was in the missions aspect of Providence. So we did a lot of research. Finally, when she was in town again, we sat down, Lainey, Jesse, and I, at Nukes with Carol Ward. As we talked to Carol, I realized, and I asked her a lot of questions doctrinally, a lot of questions about her background, a lot of questions. I mean, this is a woman she's a third generation missionary. She's not really an American. She looks like American. She talks like American. She's a missionary, and she's been in other cultures more than she's been in America. And her grandparents were with Eric Liddell in China. Eric Liddell was the Olympian that Chariots of Fire. If you've ever seen Chariots of Fire, that was her grandparents, and her parents were in where was it? Like Philippines? Philippines in Muslim controlled areas where
the terrorists
were everywhere, and her dad their family was under constant threat. That's how she grew up, and with Wycliffe. She was a Wycliffe. Their parents were Wycliffe Bible translators into a language that had never had a Bible. So that's kind of her story. And so I'm realizing that this lady's got a lot of legitimacy. And the next thing was, when she's telling us all this stuff about her organization, which is Favor Africa, she's the only, I'm going to say white person, because I don't know another thing. She's not really a Westerner because she's such a missionary person. But she's the only white person involved. And she went to Africa and went to Uganda when Uganda was experiencing civil war, and everybody was getting out. They weren't offering, the United States wasn't given permission. Nobody was giving permission to go there. And she said, through crazy circumstances in her life, she was broken, and she said, I want to go where no one else will go, and that's why she went there. When people are getting killed constantly, war's going on, and she goes there. She doesn't know what to do except for to pray, so she just begins to pray. More people gather to join her. Long story short, she opened a house of prayer. She doesn't have organizational genius. She doesn't have, she really can't do much, worldly wise. So her genius is she started giving away all the jobs. She started giving away, raising up people and letting people who had administrative abilities and people that had all these different things. She's a networker, and she's someone who has the humility to not have to be the person doing everything. So what she basically is kind of they call her Mama. They call her Mama, and Mama Carol, because she doesn't really do anything except for she's kind of the one that really encourages them to just continue to aspire. So Carol is legit. I went over 2 years ago to see the organization myself, to talk to her about what we want to do is plant churches in unreached people areas. I met with several pastors there that she got to go. We got to South Sudan. I'm not going to tell you about that trip because that's not what this is about. But long story short, we recognized that there were these few people groups that were unreached completely. And the Kachipo people were one of two that we were considering. And this is from Africans who are pastors on the edges of the country that were near the Kachipo people, that were saying the Kachipo people have not been reached. They're unreached, and we want, and so I'm asking all the questions about why do Americans need to come do this? Why don't you guys go do it? And the reason why is because of that culture there. When someone comes from far away, they're honored guests. And when somebody looks like we do, and we go into a place where they've not seen people that look like we do, who've come from far away, that gives legitimacy to the good news that we're telling them. And so it also gives legitimacy that Americans come, regardless of our color. Americans come means that the world's kind of paying attention to something. And so the government goes, oh, we better pay attention to this. And so God opened a lot of doors before going here to be able to, through Carol's organization, Favor Africa, and also through other organizations that Carol has done a great job networking with. I got to meet with one of the cabinet members of South Sudan, who's over all religious affairs, in the last trip. And then we also got a lot of great connections with Wycliffe to find out about what Bible translation's going on there. God just started, I guess the short of it is God started putting things together and things started falling in line. Now, I got to tell you, there was a spiritual warfare going on here. There was a crisis in our family 2 years ago, and many of you know about this, but there was a huge crisis in our family that took place right when I left for the last trip. Darla calls me the night we were there. It was a disaster going on, and I couldn't get home. In addition to that, we had a lot of crisis going on in our church that most people didn't know about. But some of it was over the fact that we were making this decision to go to, we were considering going to Africa. And that I was in Africa, and a lot of things were just coming together, so there was a lot of spiritual warfare. And I immediately knew this. I mean, it was like when I'm in Africa and all these things start falling apart back home, and then when I came back and it just seemed to get worse, I'm thinking, I knew that this is spiritual warfare. That the devil does not want us to do this. I mean, it was very, very clear. As clear as anything I've ever known in my life to be clear. And so, the Bible says to not be overcome by evil, but to overcome evil with good. And so the determination on me and several other people to say, no, we're praying about this. We know this is what God wants us to do. Let's do this. So we began the process working with Favor Africa, listening to what they were saying. They're preparing the way. They're asking, we're finding out when the timing is going to be right, what the team needs to look like, all these little facets. We hire Matt, incredible, great hire. Matt comes on board and really puts structure to it. So we start determining what the best timing and the best team and the best requirements to go on this trip. We started off with, I think, 17 people, 17 men. There were more women that like 5 or 6 women that also wanted to go on this trip, this first trip. But guys, this just wasn't and this has all been confirmed that this wouldn't have been a good trip. I mean, I was thinking the whole time, is this a good trip for me? I mean, I'm 52 years old. I don't know that I can live through this. It was just so hard. And I'm just telling you, it took physical. We talked about this, before we went, and God just continued to narrow down the team. Carol had first of all said that she wanted only. You needed to be in good physical fitness. That we found that out really clearly, that if you're not physically fit, I've got a whole list of need not apply if list of things if we do a similar trip like this, because guys, it was brutal. And I'm going to tell you, I played college football. I've backpacked my whole life. I've worked in really hard jobs, and nothing compares to what this was like. And I bet you guys would say the same thing. I mean, this was brutal. Not to mention some of the dangers that were there. And these guys were incredible. And I got to tell you, I got to brag on these two guys, because there was no complaining. Mike had blisters all over the bottoms of his feet, on his toes, behind his heel. Not blisters. They broke off. They broke up and bled. He was bleeding. And I'm going to tell you, this guy never complained. I didn't hear him complain one time. And in fact, that was kind of a little bit, hey Victor, it was kind of a little bit of a downer too, because when he's not complaining, that's why it got so bad, because you didn't have time to complain, because we're hauling it. And
I've been left. I mean, if I complained and stopped to really take care of what I needed to do, I would have been left.
Yeah.
I mean, those guys, our guides were moving.
Yeah.
I mean, they were trucking. There was no slowing down. And even when we did say, hey, we gotta have a breather, it was like, okay. That was it.
It's just imagine with a backpack going through 6 foot grass. No, 7 foot grass. It's over our heads. Most of the time, you can't see 3 feet in front of you, and the guys are going, and they're just gone. And so they're walking. They don't have, well, some of them did, but most of them didn't have packs. They had a gun. They're packing, but they didn't have packs. And they're going through the high Johnson grass that you can't see 4 feet in front of you. You can't see the person in front of you. And if you're not staying right there with them, you lose them. And I don't know how many times I got off the trail because you can't see the trail. You can't see where you are. So these guys are flying. And imagine doing that kind of situation, and you're walking as fast as you possibly can. To go any faster, you got to run. And it's just you can't run with a 30, 40-pound pack on you. You just can't. And so that's where we were. There's rocks in front of you. There's mountains we had to climb. There's, sometimes you're going through jungle areas. It was crazy. And the whole time you're thinking, this is crazy, this is crazy, this is crazy. Why are we doing this? This is insane. We're never going to make it, and we're just on our way there. And it's that kind of thing. So the physical fitness thing was huge. God blessed us and gave us the ability to pack right. Everything we packed was intentional. Most everything. I think there's a few things that we didn't use, but most everything we packed was intentional. I'm going to tell you what the goal was, and then I'm going to sit down and let these guys talk. The goal was that we were going to try to get in contact with people in a village of the Kachipo people. Kachipo. K-A-C-H-I-P-O. Kachipo. And we were going to hopefully introduce the gospel to a few people. And we wanted to not just share the gospel with everybody because there's no church there. There's no follow-up there. So our prayer was that God would direct us to the right people in the right place so that we could share the gospel with a few. This would be a big win. We talked about it before we went. It's a big, big win if we are able to communicate with them, if we can find a translator, if we can communicate the gospel clearly, that's a win. A bigger win is if somebody actually receives the gospel. And then a bigger win is if we have English speakers that we can give an English Bible to so that they can stay and grow somehow by themselves. And then a bigger win, like hit it out of the park home run, would be if Favor Africa would then come right behind us and do a PBS, a portable Bible school, which is what they do. All of these things were hugely, not impossible, but very improbable. Those things were not very probable. Just us getting there was a huge win, just getting to the people. And then the rest of it, we were dependent on God to just open the door and let us do that. So that was the goal. You tell more about the journey, because we're going to do this in a very shortened version on Sunday. So I'm going to get out of here and let y'all stand up, Mike.
Actually, I need to sit.
You'll
so I
sit,
can,
okay.
Yeah. Just so I can manage this. Just real quick, I've got a few videos on here, but most of what I'm just going to do a slideshow. But this is just kind of an example of what Chad was talking about. These are corn stalks right now, but if you get to the next one, this is the kind of grass we're going through. So you can see that's me in front of, I guess Chad took this one. But if you don't keep up, and those, the grass closes in front of you, you're lost quickly.
When we're filming, that means we're able to put.
It usually means the grass is a lot lower.
This is the best part of the trip.
Yeah, I mean, because when it's really thick, you can't.
You can see I stopped it there because we're going back into the thick stuff.
You're hitting rocks nonstop, and you got to look down the whole time as you're walking.
There's a couple of just real short videos that I just wanted to show because one of them begins, and then we'll do some pictures, and then. But this one, if you can hear it.
This is Upper Boma.
Yeah. Where's the volume, Chef?
That one right there.
This one?
No, the one close to you. South Sudan, and we're about to go looking for the Kachipo people. And they live beyond that mountain that's behind me there. And this is going to be an exciting time, exciting next 10 days. Right now it's July the 14th, 2019, and we're going to be going from Boma is where we are, Upper Boma, and we're going to be going over that mountain, and we're going to be taking the gospel with us. So we just pray for help and from God to communicate well when we get there, and of course we want to be able to get there safely and without health problems or issues.
So that one, Chad just goes a little bit more in depth. So that mountain you saw in the background, all these are basically getting up to there. And then this one's David. This is pretty funny.
They just let me know the good news. We're going all the way to those small mountains, if you can see them over there. That's going to be crazy. In Africa, everything is 1 hour. 1 hour. American hours is 12.
So
I mean,
and
seriously,
it's-
that's not joking.
It's funny, but by
10
the
more
time-
minutes, 3 hours later.
By the time we filmed this video, we figured out that they have no concept of distance and time. They just don't live the way we do. I don't think any of them wore watches. If they did, they definitely weren't set to normal times. But yeah, I mean, an hour turned into 6 hours really quick, which from my point of view, you know, it wasn't like I didn't want to be, Dad, are we there yet? You know, that person. But at the same time, once I started hurting, I needed to kind of know, okay, do I need to really stop? If we got 8 hours more of this, do I need to stop and deal with this? But it was like, oh, just a little bit longer. And I'm going, okay, well, I can bite my lip and get through it a little bit longer. But a little bit longer wound up being a lot longer. So, again, journeying through this.
By the way, that little, what Dave just showed, that was about 50 miles.
Across where, yeah, because that was at the beginning. That video that you just saw was at the very beginning.
And this is where we bedded down on the way, halfway there. Now, going there, we were all carrying our backpacks because we didn't really have any help. And so we couldn't travel at the Mach speed we did coming back, but, you know, show the
I think
tents.
that's actually what did it for me, was the pace. I mean, I had a rub on the back of my heel from my boot, but just the pounding pace as fast as we were going is really what got to me. So this is right before
Tuesday, the 16th. There's David. There's Paul. There's all of our friends. All our friends. All of our guides. And we're going to that mountain over there. Going past those trees on the top of that hill. And down in that valley, we understand, is Mizun.
That's Ethiopia.
And Mizun there's a new work that started there among the Kachifo people. And that new work we're going to see and be with those people. They're suffering, they're hungry, they are persecuted because they've got a warring tribe that steals cattle, so they got rid of the cattle, and they're way out. It's 1:34, so that means we've been hiking for what's that, guys? So 5.5 hours today, 10 hours yesterday, 15.5 hours.
So 15.5 hours, and we're about an hour from our destination. So 16 hours total. So when they said 2 days worth of hiking, it's 2 8-hour days worth of hiking.
Yeah, it's actually, in my journal, it was 9 hours the second day, 10 hours the first day, 9 hours the second day. Was what we hiked.
So I'll just back up just a bit, because when I guess I don't need to go through all the stuff leading
I think
up to
you're
it.
doing good.
One of the things that was cool is we got to what I nicknamed the IED Expressway.
This is before we got to where you just saw.
Yeah, basically this is the border crossing, so you can see this huge line of people, and with Paul being our military contact, he streamlined us through all this. So we bypassed all this, got stamped, and we're back in the car in a matter of minutes. And then we made it through this compound, but the rest of the way was this type of road. This is, I guess David took this, I think he was in the back. So we had our military escort behind us there, and then in front of us were two more. In front of that little van, there's a pickup truck with about 5 or 6.
With a 50 cal on top of it.
Yeah.
With a 50 cal and about 6 or 8 soldiers in the back.
So, and come to find out, I'll fast forward, but once we got back, we went through our whole time in the village. Once we got back, there was a news article that the day before, I'm sorry, I guess the day after, right? The day after we came through here,
No, the day before.
the day before we came through here, there was 8 people murdered on this road. And we heard that had been going on. Basically, the military hasn't been paid. There's all kinds of corruption going on, and so they're just turning into mercenaries out there, and anybody that seems to be vulnerable on the road, they stop and they rob them and kill them for the most part. So we knew that had kind of
There's
gone
women
on.
raped.
So the story of the Good Samaritan come alive right there, because,
Yeah.
you know, that's probably what happened to him. He was on the road and got hijacked.
Now, why that's important is we missed our very first flight. The 3 of us are literally sitting as close as we are right now. All of us have fairly good hearing, at least. None of us saw a plane come or go. We didn't see people get up to load the plane. And we were from here to the kitchen from the desk where they call it. So obviously a God thing there that none of us heard it, and we're
We missed the flight.
able to get on an airplane back to South. So we missed our first flight, which would have put us a day before on this road. So one of the providences we talked about was the fact that there was a lot of things that we saw God's action throughout that, but that was kind of the first one when we realized that we had just missed that situation by a matter of a day. So you can see a lot of this stuff's bombed out. There actually are people in this picture, but most of the road, there was nothing there. There's some sort of a military vehicle that had been blown up and overturned. So while we're driving down this road, we had to go fast because we wanted to get through as fast as we could, and we had escort in front and back. But we're also weaving around all these big, huge potholes where IEDs had blown up, and we're just trying to get through. So
And you got to be careful about taking pictures because the military people don't want any pictures taken.
Yep.
So if they catch you, that's what happened to me. I got jerked out 2 years ago because I wanted to take a picture of the Obama Bridge. And there happened to be a military people in front of me, and I didn't realize. And so.
yeah, David even got yelled at for taking a picture of a church.
Yeah.
Which actually was a great picture, by the way.
No, she wasn't in it. She chewed me out. I mean, out.
Chad and I were sitting there wondering where David went. He went around the corner, and we hear this lady was just chewing him out.
About 70 years old. She was probably cussing me up a storm. I don't know, but she jerked my phone from me, and she. It's like, I'll show you the pictures. And there's no pictures. I took. I said, no pictures, no pictures. And finally, she was still cussing me. I just said, okay, bye-bye. And walked away.
Yeah. So that road that I just showed you led to Gulu, which is where these pictures are. This is the second location of Favorite Africa. This is the first one is actually in Uganda. This one is in South Sudan. And the reason I want to stop here is you'll notice it's dark. It actually wasn't that late at night. But the town of Juba, the city of Juba, has zero power.
Not the town, the capital.
The capital city.
Capital
largest
city
Capital
of
city.
South Sudan has no power.
electricity
So it's
and
all
running water.
yeah.
No running water, no power.
It's all ran off a diesel generator, so in order to save gas, about 10 o'clock they shut down all the power.
If there's any.
Yeah, everything's
Where there
flat.
is any.
So we kind of planned our mission, so to speak, by flashlight on this map here. So this is the worship center. My brother-in-law put a good Facebook post about this Juba for Jesus, and then at the bottom, it's hard to see, but it says Bibles instead of bullets. That could not be more true. I mean, that's
didn't quite
exactly
understand
what
that
we
till
need. is Bibles
We're out
instead of
there.
bullets at this place, because it's rough country. So there's Carol addressing that. They do every morning. They have a staff meeting and a worship service, and it sometimes lasts a couple hours. So they get a lot of time together.
So think about that Providence staff.
I've seen your all's powwows before service.
And if you don't clock in before 8 and you miss a little bit of time, you get fired. But she didn't put up with it.
So this is a street side meal. We had a barbecue
Oh,
chicken.
now that was a great meal. That was
good.
That was like the highlight of the whole trip.
That's a big fake smile on my face.
Yeah,
because
Chad was hurting right there.
Chad was
I got to stay near a bathroom at this point.
And the guy that runs this place, we didn't know it, but apparently he had ran next door and bought us all soda. So Chad was talking about how, when Americans show up, they really want to cater to us and just, I guess it's a form of, it's hospitality, but it's also just kind of impressive. So this guy just walked next door and bought us some sodas and brought them to us just out of the blue. So people were very, very,
That
very
is
nice.
the best meal we had
yeah, it was great.
Yep.
the whole time.
So where they're pointing, we basically started. Juba is where you saw those pictures. Juba is where we're talking about there's no power. Where he's pointing is Boma. So we took a plane from there to where his finger is, and then walked further in on foot. So where his finger is the last place where we were either a plane or vehicle at all. From there, we were on foot and walked almost to the Ethiopian border. You saw that picture where I pointed to the back mountain range, which would have been across that border. So just kind of a...
Which was still a 2-day hike by.
Yeah.
And where our hut was the Ethiopian highway trail. that went by our hut. So people were coming in all the time with machine guns right beside our hut from Ethiopia.
So before we left on our plane to Juba, or from Juba to Boma, we hiked this really steep mountain, but it was really cool. This is the drive up there. They have a 104.1 radio station where it's basically like the Christian rock station, but they have a lot of talk radio where they read Bible scriptures. They have a couple of call-in shows and stuff like that, but their mission is to reach as many people in South Sudan as they can. So this mountaintop, they're going to somehow, I think we've determined it's going to take a helicopter to do it, but they're going to put a big, huge tower on top so they can reach all
All of
across
South
the
Sudan.
land. But this was pretty neat. I never got the information on how these crosses got there, but there was 3 different crosses on top of this mountain. And I don't know if you can see, but between them, right here, this is a lady that she said she asked us for a sip of water and said she'd been up there all day. And it's like 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock at this point. So she said she'd been up there all day praying and worshiping and was just parched. So
And
apparently
people
it's
kept
pretty
coming
popular.
up there and
Yeah.
praying and crying for the nation and crying for their family. And so it was very, I mean, you know, I struggle to go to my bedroom to pray. That's a tough
Yeah, they
walk
climb
to
a
go
mountain. It was pretty tough. You can see that I'm a sweaty guy, as you can't see. You're going to see more of that. I'm not. Pride went away about halfway up this mountain. That's Levio. He was our second driver. David was the first driver. Chad had known him from a couple of years ago, but this guy, I got to give credit to drive. They're up there with New York City cab drivers. Driving in that I don't want to do it. I drive fast and pretty aggressive to begin with, and I'd get killed over there. Everybody's on motorcycles, just whipping in. There's no lights. There's no
lines.
You go first. There's no lines. It's just everybody's free for all. Get there alive if you can. So.
Uganda's on the left side
Yeah.
of the road, then you cross the border and
South
on the right
Sudan,
side
you're
of
on
the
the
road.
right side of the road.
It's crazy.
So this is coming down. You'll notice some of these pictures aren't very good quality because Chat took these from, he zoomed in, so we're pretty, we kind of had to maneuver our way up onto this cliff. So anyway, Chad decides he's going to pick up some
Chad
trash.
gets lost. on
And I'm
this.
following Chad down. Everybody else,
They
it's me and
get
Chad in the
lost.
back.
I thought they'd been hijacked. I mean, literally. I mean, I didn't tell you this, but I
We
literally.
went down the whole
I
other
got
side of the
nervous
mountain.
because we were in the truck like 10 minutes. Like, what in the? Where are they? And I started yelling, kept yelling up the mountain for them, and I didn't see them. And I got out. I just started walking up there. And I said, "Oh my God, they done got hijacked. They're getting robbed. They've been knifed. People are stealing stuff from." So I come up over the hill, and I still can't find them. I'm looking everywhere, and I'm screaming, yelling, and then finally, I hear Chad yell way down the valley. He went down the wrong dang valley.
Here's that's where our
I was
Land
sweating
Cruiser
bullets.
was parked. And Chad and I wound up coming out around this mountain over here.
I thought, they're gone. They're gone. Already. We didn't even started the mission, and they're out.
So was this their practice hike?
Yeah, so we just looked up and we're like, hey, where are we? We've been talking, just having a good time. Okay, so next morning we got on this little plane.
It was a good plan.
It was.
Yeah,
No
neither
problems
of
with
the
the
plane rides on the small planes were actually bad. The plane from Ethiopia was worse than that. So you can see it's kind of cramped a little bit of above scenery there. Everything's just green, but the thing that Chad and I kept saying, we didn't see anything for an hour at least.
Hour and 45 minutes.
Yeah, hour and a half, hour and 45-minute ride. We saw maybe 15 minutes worth of people and any type of development. I mean, it was just in
Road,
the middle of
anything. There
nowhere.
was no sign of human life.
There is no overpopulation in the world. There's plenty of land. There's plenty of land.
So this is actually right before we landed on our grass runway, and then there's as soon as we got off the plane. So this is Matthew, who works for Hope Vision. We'll talk a little bit about them in a second. And then these two went back. This is Peter and Carol. They got back on the plane and left. And
After an
then
hour of
everybody
arguing.
else. Yeah, the plane.
The chief of the tribe wouldn't let the plane leave because they hadn't paid their $100 landing fee from several times ago. And so they were holding Carol and all them up. So it took about an hour of negotiation before they could get off.
That's what we call a shakedown.
This guy right here, his name's Gabriel. he is an awesome
Yeah.
guy.
Yeah.
And he and Paul is he's a military guy, but he's also going to be a bishop in the Episcopal Church of South Sudan, and so he can switch uniforms. Like you'll
Yeah.
see him looking like a military dude when that's appropriate, and then he'll switch into his bishop collar when that's appropriate. And he's a very highly respected guy. He's a Dinka, which Dinkas are, Manute Bol and some of the big tall people from Africa that come to NBA and play. They're super, super, super tall. They're Dinkas because it's in their culture to marry tall women. So they just keep getting taller and taller, and they're just like 7 footers.
And the tribes, some tribes, they pull certain teeth out so you know who they are.
Yeah.
So his whole bottom teeth were pulled out. Almost all his bottom
As
teeth
kids,
were pulled out.
they'll pull their teeth out as a traditional
And then,
identifier.
and then a lot of these people had markings across their forehead or on the side of their face to identify they're one of 65 tribes in South Sudan.
So,
They served us honey with the comb and the bees.
You get the bees for free. It doesn't cost any extra, no extra.
But the honey actually was really good.
yeah.
It was delicious, but
So this is kind of
had
our
to
little
filter out the bees.
homestead. This is in Boma City, so this is the last city, I guess you would call it. that
This is
we
kind of our
saw.
staging camp, for lack of a better term.
And this was Hard Rock Cafe. This is the Hard Rock Kitchen right here, and that's where they cooked our food.
That's where we slept.
That's our hut.
Just a little bit of landscape.
That was Best Western Boma. What was
Of
that?
course, I took pictures of food. There's our hotel room.
And this is Chad and I's honeymoon tent.
We've learned everybody needs.
We learned everybody needs their own tent.
Sometimes your own room.
We'll just stop right there.
Yeah.
So this is Upper Boma. We're in what's called Lower Boma. So that's Upper Boma. That was the first 4 hours of our trip the next morning.
And probably
It was tough.
3,000 or 4,000 feet
Yeah.
in incline.
Very, very steep. To the point to where if I hadn't have been in so much pain with my feet, I almost would have rather walked than taken the tractor back down. 'Cause
Yeah,
it
we
was-
got a tractor that
It
brought
was
us down.
scary and rough, but
Yeah.
that's nice.
Now, rice tasted, we were blessed. We loved it when we had rice. It was wonderful.
Yeah, rice was a treat. So the next morning, actually, we didn't leave the very first next morning. This was the Sunday. We arrived on a Saturday, so this is Sunday morning, and we went to the Gia tribe, which was about a 30-minute walk from where we just showed. And they had just
An hour.
started. Was it really? Wow. They had just started this church a couple of weeks before, and you can see it's mostly children. The parents are kind of in the back. But I got quite a bit of footage here. We won't go through a bunch of it, but basically you can see the size of the crowd. So for just a couple of weeks old of a church, that's pretty impressive. And this gentleman was the worship leader, so he was actually really good at keeping them energized.
He's also the guy that
Yeah.
abandoned us and stole a bunch of money from that base camp where we were, and this is a problem in Africa. He had told the other guys that he was a prophet, and he is a very
He's very
talented,
gifted.
incredible, just charismatic in the good sense of the word guy. And but then we find out after we leave, he just can't take direction, and he was a guy that wouldn't submit himself to anybody, and they were worried about him and told him that he needed to stay, and he did stay, and then he stole all the money from him and split. So
Like, go back one. Okay, down in Boma, they have suckers, those little plastics, the suckers with the little plastic straws. They put holes in their lip, and there's probably 100 kids have these sucker straws coming out of their lip. Some of them would have two, like fangs coming out. So that when you see that, I don't know where it went, right there, that's what that is, a sucker straw, one of those plastic sucker straws.
just as kind of a marker.
So this is the next morning where we're actually leaving.
Getting ready to leave. We have no idea what's about to happen.
Yeah, I mean,
We're all jolly, eating our protein bars and not realizing. Come on now. So this is just starting up the mountain. Not sure why I'm not getting it. So when we got, this is the school. When we got to the top, to Upper Boma, there was this school which wasn't in use.
Not loaded yet.
No, because my phone is just as bad as their internet either way. Sorry, they're kind of blurry, but so this is Upper Boma where we stopped for about an hour rest. We ate some lemons, which were actually refreshing. Even though
they were like a lemon lime mixture. Boy, they were sour, but it was still good.
We fantasized about them.
Yeah.
We were really wanting them on the way back. I didn't enjoy them going that much, but coming back, I was like, oh man, give me some of those things.
So this kind of gets us back to where Chad took that video, and of course everything's still going to be loading slowly. But
While you're figuring that out, the Upper Boma, there was a compound. The last civilization we saw of any type was that compound, and it was a bunch of Kenyans who had come and started a ministry that was called SEA Partners. And the SEA stands for Sudan Evangelical Alliance. Is that right? Association. And so all of the evangelical churches, Baptist, Methodist, Presbyterian, in Kenya, had during the wars of South Sudan had said, we're Africans. They took the initiative. African Christians went to try to help these people during the war. So they went in this far post, which at the time that was the furthest outpost of civilization. And you can see that there's been some development there. But anyway, they were trying to do good work, and that was the last vestige of any kind. And it's rough, guys. If any of you walked in there and you saw that, what we're calling the last vestige of civilization, what I mean by that is they had a well.
They had water.
they had water.
They had a hole in the ground and a closed
And a
door where
little
you could go
gravity shower.
use the bathroom. You know, they had a gravity shower with a hose.
Yeah, there was our showers and bathrooms.
Yeah, and that's the last civilization we saw. I mean, that was it. I mean, anything close to a vestige of civilization, that was it. And we were so thankful to get back to that.
When we got back to
Last
this,
material-
it was like coming to the.
Would you
Here's
call
one
it
of the
a
ways-
Hilton or something?
One of the ways I kind of judged it is this is the last time you saw building materials.
Yeah.
Like corrugated metal. I mean, you know, any of this. Everything else is made from grass, rock, or dirt. Mud. From here on out, I mean, there's nothing. So anyway,
I honestly didn't think huts still existed.
So that's where David just had made that statement. We're kind of standing on top of the mountain in Upper Bolta. We'll show a lot of the rock formation that's right next to us here.
yeah, I'm gonna use the bigger group of pictures and just go through it faster.
We went down that stuff, if you can see. We went down, climbed down that mountain, down those rocks, and we're into
This
like
is the
mango jungle. And where there's big mango groves and stuff like that. And we got lost 2 or 3 times. Our guides got lost.
You can see the terrain coming down. This is looking back up where we just came down from. This is when we. Part of the challenge, and I kind of just got into a zone because I mean, literally, you just have grass. So I think Chad and I were talking at one point. He said, "Do not apply if you're claustrophobic because you're in like a little hallway of grass." And the challenging thing was, we had sticks that occasionally you would need to help climb the mountain or whatever else, but to spread the grass so you could see. So the challenging thing was being able to spread the grass and see where the person in front of you was stepping without jabbing them in the heel with your stick,
Which happened
a lot. So it was kind of one of those things where it was just ongoing fighting this grass. Even though we didn't have a bunch of elevation at this point, it was 8 or 9 hours worth of just
Grass.
that. As far as, and you can't even see the mountains that we're going to You turn around, you can't see the mountains we just came from. It's just.
It was 9 hours through that valley.
Yeah. 9 hours seeing the same thing, and when you're seeing this, that was when you could actually take a picture because the grass not knocking the camera out of your hand because it was just so thick. So these are
Did we
the.
have determined this was an elephant or something that had slept here? That the reason the grass is actually flattened out, something had
or
slept
hippo
here
or something, yeah.
recently, and that we came to this and thought, well, somebody rested here, so we're going to do the same. And this is where we rested that night. We actually pushed this grass down ourselves and made our own little spot. And I'll tell you, you can see it's not dark yet, but we're about 50 yards from a little spring, and my life straw, I had a little canister that I could just dip in the water and put the lid on and just suck through. So I went to fill up my canister of water where they had the things that you had to filter from one bag to the other. I got lost 50 yards worth of this grass in dusk. And I think I came walking back out in the middle of this grass instead of the trail. So it's just, I mean, you step off the trail and don't know where you are, you're lost. Even though I wasn't.
And next morning, about 4:30 in the morning, it started raining. So we had rain coming down. So then we had to pack up with everything wet.
It's awesome.
That was fun.
Good times.
So same thing next morning, just back to the grass, and then we finally started going up hills, and this is the last
There's the
hill
mountain we gotta go to.
to get to the Cachipo people. So we sat down on our last rest, and I just happened to look up, and nobody had seen it yet, and I look up and saw this, and I thought it was a dead animal at first, which it's part of one. But then I elbowed
It's a
Chad. I was like,
gazelle
"Hey,
skin.
look at that!" And it's some sort. Was it a gazelle?
Gazelle skin. So let me set the scene for this one. So we finally, after all this walking, we are at, you can see that there's corn there. And we are at the edge of the village. And over the hill is the Cachipo village. This is why we came. And so your heart's beating and you're going, oh my gosh, what are we going to see? What's going to happen? And we hear guns firing. And then we hear people hooping and hollering and hooping it up. And then they tell us, well, they're having a festival right now of some sort. And so we don't know if we're going to go offend them by going in here. And then Mike looks and sees that skin and is like, is this a warning? You know, what is this? And so
right after that, we rested for a minute, and then we got over to the very top of the hill, and there was some more tall grass at the top of the hill, and there was a couple of people. I think Chad was in front of me, and then out of it was like being in a fun house at the fair. I see a black face and an AK-47 just come out of the grass right at me, and I'm going, oh, okay, well, here we go.
here,
I'm done. And the guy reached out and he still didn't smile at all, but he reached out and shook my hand, and then passed by and kept on going. And they got in front of us, and there was two of them, both of them just, AK-47s, and they got in front of us, and then we heard a couple of shots fired in the air. And come to find out, that's actually, they were going to warn the tribe that visitors were on the way. And obviously we were, they would have killed us if they had thought we were a threat.
Stacy Beard would have died about 20 times because of all the
lots
guns
of
and
guns
the shots
pointed
and
at you.
drunk people. Oh my gosh, I thought about you so many times.
You've been arrested.
So this is walking in.
You see the face? You see the face?
We've been walking since 7.
And when I shut up in a second, you'll
We
hear.
are about to enter the village. I don't know if you can hear. I'll be quiet so you can hear the singing. There's a festival going on, we're told. But I don't want to walk in filming, so I'll stop. So you
Chad
can
says,
see
go ahead.
the people ahead.
Keep it on.
I'm gonna get killed. Hope it's good footage, Chad.
Deep. This is what we came for.
I haven't seen this. This is great. This is where we entered the village. This is it.
Yeah, but I did turn it off right here.
You see our guy up there with his toboggan on. His wool toboggan.
And the other guy had a jacket on.
Yeah.
So from this, and then it picks up again here in a second, but I really
We were
didn't want
worried
to walk
about-
in getting killed. So I put the camera down for a few minutes, but we just got swarmed with people. And chalet, right?
Chalet.
Chalet, like
Chalet,
a chalet
chalet.
in the mountains. is their form of hello. So I said chalet 150 times. Just
If you
constantly.
smile and say, the strategy was smile, because
Right.
it disarms people, and they see you're friendly, and so you smile and you learn their greeting, and you say chalet, you hand up, you put your hand out to them, and you'll go from mean face to, so it's like, it just changes everything. It's like a smile. It's a universal.
One thing I couldn't.
church on Sunday.
It is same
Yeah.
thing.
One thing that I
What
will
really
never
shocked me.
forget is when I was younger. I remember my grandfather teaching me how to shake hands as a man. You get in it. You shake hard.
They don't do that.
No, these people are like,
I know.
and even the men, big old
Like a
men
little-
carrying
little
AK-47s,
fish.
like, and I was like, so I had to get used to it because the first couple times one of their faces was like,
Soft shake.
again, I could have gotten killed for shaking a hand. But. So after 150 handshakes and chalet, then this is where we pick
And you
it.
should see.
Chico Village. There's a festival going on. It was just a warm greeting. We were just greeted by all the natives. We just walked in and everyone just came running up to us and greeted us.
Yeah.
Chalet. Chalet. It's pretty awesome. There's stick fighting. It's part of the festival.
We'll see more of that in a second.
This is where it'll be rated R. So.
Yeah, I'll show a few of these the main,
Weather, kind of like it is here.
It was not as hot.
not even
Yeah,
as
probably
hot.
not as hot.
right now, right?
Well, it's the rainy
Rainy
season.
season.
I'm gonna skip through these. a
In
little
fact,
bit,
it was
but-
raining right
Yeah,
now.
it started raining right there.
Yeah.
One of the things I want you to notice, because there's a bunch of these videos and some of them are long, is just listen in the background for crack. It sounds like a whip cracking, but that is literally, these people beat the snot out of each other with these sticks. I mean, it's not like, you'll see David here in a minute. I got a video of him with one of the kids, but I mean, these guys were serious. And we would pass people that are just split.
Blood,
Just
eyes
running down
cross-eyed, ears
And they
cut
didn't,
off.
they
Fingers
didn't
broken.
do anything about it. There was a clinic that someone had started a couple of years before, and the guy was telling us that all the medication and bandages and stuff that they put in the clinic 2 years before was still there unopened, and half of it was about to expire. So the people, for some reason, they won't even go get medical attention. They'll just bleed. And
They
flies
believed
on it. And
they
just-
believed it was bad blood that was coming out of them.
It was pretty bad blood. The funny thing, Gabriel was taller than anybody in the entire village, and he had this iPad that was all broken, and you would see him in all these pictures. He's in the middle of all these people filming with this iPad. No matter what, he's got this iPad with him the whole time. It's fun.
See, look at these scars. I don't know if they didn't have tattoos. They engraved with razor knives or some kind of knife in every.
Well,
They're
branded,
everywhere.
They branded each other.
You'll see this group, and they're kind of doing this weird mumbling thing. It's like a victory dance, and they kind of shuffle out of the picture, and then they turned around and came back and started another fight with somebody else. But it was kind of eerie. I mean, it takes a lot to rattle me, but just the low murmur of whatever these people were saying. Okay, so after that, this is just a little, they walked us about another 15 minutes to where we actually were staying. This is some footage of an old school that was
Burnt down.
burned out. And then I think this is,
That's our shower.
That's
there's
our
one
shower.
There's one that's pretty good from David here.
You guys-
Ed Jones in Connecticut's asked me to check out our
That's
next
my man.
vacation spot for the awards winners of Connecticut, the great sales team. Well, what we got right here, if you just barely make it, you get that little tin over there. But if you make 350 points. You get this one right here. You get this one.
This is the one.
All resort. You even get a deer skin right here to sleep on. It's awesome. You'll love this deer skin. And you got a net for mosquitoes. So it's really, really nice arrangements. You could bring your own tent if you want to. Now for those who just barely made it, you know, right here's your place. You know, you got a little bit of cover, but you're still here, man. You're still here. Now, here's the best right here. This one right here is the Mac Daddy. You get over 500 points. You don't just get this hut. You get mattresses with it. I mean, the best mattresses in South Sudan. So come on down. You can charge your phone here. So this is the big award winner. So we'd love to see you here. And then we get to play some games. I'm going to show you a little bit later.
Stick fight.
You know, and you'll note he said you can charge your phone here. One of the things that I thought was crazy is there wasn't an internet signal in 100 miles from where we are, but yet probably every fourth person had a cell phone. Seriously.
AK and a cell phone. That's the only modern thing you saw.
Couldn't get a signal for anything, but they had an AK and a cell phone, and that's what you needed to leave the house, the hut. But it was kind of crazy. It's a testament to modern technology, I guess. There. So
Throw.
David,
Catch. Throw.
kids. There's a lot of orphans around.
I didn't want to find a big one.
David was dead.
They get trained from birth, so I said, send me a little one.
It took me, Chad, and Paul, all three of us, to talk him out of not actually stick
Yeah, he
fighting.
wanted to go in there and stick
I
fight.
think
But
what
they
got him
all
was
fight
we told him
together.
he
If
had
it'd
to
been
do it
one-on-one, I would have done it.
All right. I deleted the one where he took a beat down there. Okay, so this one's
This is the
probably
big boys.
one of the
This is
more
the next
serious.
day. This is kind of the main field.
Yeah.
This is where they.
And, you know, there was a festival when we arrived, and we kind of thought, well, maybe it's a one-day festival. And I'll go ahead and just tell this part because we were looking for opportunities to spread the gospel. That's what we went there to do, was to spread the gospel. So we kind of started to get frustrated over the next couple of days because this, which just got worse and worse the drunker they got. They figured out how to ferment corn somehow.
Well, it was sugar cane and honey that they fermented.
Oh, okay. So anyway, they just kind of, the festival lasted quite a few days, even through Saturday night, which I guess this is probably Friday afternoon. And even some of the women would just come staggering up to you, just completely out of their minds. But it's really hard to share the gospel with people that are drunk, half of them with their head laid open from a stick, and the other half trying to, just maintain. So a lot of this kind of stuff went on.
It's game day. Last day of the festival. They're starting the stick battles. I don't know what they call it, but we've seen guys with knots all over their head. We've seen broken hands. We've seen cuts. Oh, there's a helmet right there. Do you see that?
That's Paul.
That's concussion. That's a concussion.
Concussion helmet.
You'll hear Paul, I think it's this video, but you'll hear Paul here in a minute say, can we not go now?
So Paul is he's a
Go ahead and just tell
he's
his
a
story.
Dinka. He's the Dinka, and because he's so high in
This
government
guy right
and
here.
the military, and he's very pro, of course, South Sudan, and he hates the fact that they're doing this. He hates it, and the whole time we were there, he wanted us to leave because I think it embarrassed him, but more than that, he was just offended that they would hurt each other, that they were acting like savages, and it really made him mad.
Yeah,
didn't
he
it?
was mad.
And he was like, this just isn't of God, this isn't Christian, this is wrong. And the thing that Gabriel and us, we really didn't get involved with it, but what Gabriel kept saying was, Paul, this is their culture. They got to get Christ first. And then we can work on these other things later. But man, this so offended him that they were acting this way, and he would constantly, whoever he could communicate with that were Kachipo, he would try to talk them and show them how dumb it was. and it was like talking to a wall, because it's like telling some, you know, like somebody coming out of the Super Bowl how dumb football is. You know what I'm talking about? Because that's their thing. This is just who they are.
Yeah, and keep in mind, this guy's been in the military 32 years. He started when he was 13. He was, if you've ever seen A Good Lie of the Lost Boys traveling, he was in that group. So he traveled around, and the only way he survived was by drinking urine. He was drinking his urine because they had no water. So this man's probably seen more killing and more things than we could ever imagine.
Yeah.
So, and he had a really
big
big heart.
Yeah.
Was that one village or several villages?
This was, we've only
This
been in
is
that
one.
one Miyun, is that one village where,
They're the only tribe that does this. And a lot of people, they have other Kachipo people in Ethiopia. Ethiopia is a bigger village, but a lot of those would come over for a 2-day hike carrying their sticks to be part of the festival from Ethiopia. And then there was a few other Kachipo people and other little tribes that would come in for the festival too.
yeah.
So it's spread out in about 4 or 5 different locations.
The largest village of the Kachipo in South Sudan is Miyun. And that's where we are when this festival's going on. And most of the other villages have representatives there in this festival. So the good thing was God had brought all the Kachipo in South Sudan to us. The bad thing was they're all drunk and they're very, very much involved in the Super Bowl going on around us. And to talk to people about Jesus when they're going to the Super Bowl, you know, that's just not, it wasn't conducive. So, but we ended up, God used it in a big way. So
We spent a day or two just kind of waiting on people to sober up, and it didn't happen until close to the end. But we wound up being successful. So here's Chad with his pepper,
oh, great.
and then there's we'll see mine later.
So I like hot
Just got some peppers off the side of the road, so he's gonna try them, see how hot they are.
Can't help myself. Gotta try the.
Those things are this big.
Exactly.
They're tiny. You see me in the back waiting for him to fall over.
The rest of the story is that it was super hot and it snuck up on you. It kept getting hotter and hotter and hotter, and my lips started burning and everything. But then that was okay, but it triggered a gag reflex. So all of a sudden I'm wanting to go puke. And I've never had that happen to me before, but that whatever's in that pepper, it makes you want to puke. Not smart, don't do that.
So we waited around. The next morning, we were told that there was going to be dancing instead of stick fighting. So at that point, we kind of had the impression that, you know, dancing would be a little bit of a better mood. And at the end of that ceremony, whatever it was, we were going to have the opportunity to preach. Well, it turns out there wasn't dancing, there was more stick fighting, and it was even worse. They'd been drinking all night long, and so it was just...
They're waking up with hangovers.
Yeah, even worse of a scene. So we decided
And
to
how do you deal with a hangover? You drink more.
Yeah.
That's what they're doing.
So we decided to do door-to-door or hut-to-hut evangelism, and so this is one of the first or second stops, and you can just kind of see the scene here. We won't go through the whole thing, but
God is the one who led us to be here now.
this is Paul giving a word through this gentleman who's translating.
We are here before you to ask you to forgive us. We put your children, our mothers and fathers and brothers and sisters, keep a year to put them under your protection. As they raise their hand for you,
He's praying.
So I think we went through probably 6 or 8 different little homesteads, I
Yeah.
guess. And there were a few people that raised their hands and said they were ready to receive Christ. But it was hard to tell whether they were just raising their hand to get us to shut up and leave.
Well, they were
or
probably
whether
just
they
saying,
were-
"Oh, heaven,
they
yeah, I
didn't
want
under-
that."
Yeah, they didn't really
So
understand what we were.
It was a developing thing for us to learn how to share the gospel with an interpreter, and it was also a developing thing because my primary goal was, when we were sharing the gospel like this, is not necessarily the people who were in the little homesteads that we were going. When we say homestead, it's hard to describe. There'll be 6 or 7 huts that are together, and most of them are related in those little groups of huts. And so, we would gather everybody from all those groups of huts, and it would be, 10 to 20 people, and they would come stand around you. And so my primary desire was not to share the gospel to get people to raise their hand. It was to let these interpreters that we had who could speak English, and this is kind of a big story. We didn't know if we were going to have any interpreters or any translators. But the truth is that because of God's providence, there had been a school that you guys saw earlier that had been burned out since, that had started there. In a few years, this school went because Hope Vision, which was a group of guys, the 2 guys that were our guides going in, were with Hope Vision. And those guys actually had their organization, and I'm shortening the story, had started a school there. And so the kids, the children that had gone to that school for 4 or 5 years had learned, some of them had learned how to speak English and had learned how to read. Those people were our translators. And so God had, even though those previous efforts had failed, no church had been started, we don't even know if any of them had genuinely received Christ when the school was there, because that wasn't the primary mission for that group. They were really wanting to start a school and wanting to have a compound there. When that all failed and burned out a couple of years ago, the 2 guys that were with us were coming back to do an evaluation to see what state of disrepair but the great thing we just praised God about is that this school, God had used that to give us a few English speakers. So now we've got these 5 or 6 English speakers, and they're all they're young men now. They're 18, 19, 20, 21 years old, and as old as Simon.
This is
Clement.
He was one of them.
One of
We'll
those.
talk about him in a second.
And so my goal when we're sharing Christ is for Clement and Joseph and Simon, who was a councilman of some sort. He was a government official.
Simon was the chief administrator.
This is Simon.
So he wasn't the chief. You'll see the chief in a minute, but the chief
That's
administrator.
Joseph.
So I guess he would basically be like the president's chief of staff.
So what happens here is we've got all these stick fighters, these young men who are in their early 20s, late teens. And this was one of these beautiful moments where they wanted to hear what we've been doing, because we'd been doing this evangelism. And all of these kids, all these young men holding guns, holding sticks, they've been fighting, they're sober, and they are paying attention, and you can watch this. It was this magic moment where now I've got 3 translators helping each other to translate. And the main guy right there, Simon, who's translating, and I'm preaching the gospel. I want the translators to hear the gospel. I'm wanting those guys to understand the gospel, because they speak English. So they heard it over and over and over and over.
Everybody know what an evangicube is?
I'd never seen one. It's really cool.
Jesus came and lived a perfect life on this earth. He claimed to be God, and he was God. Now you love people, and we want to tell you that he can forgive you of your sins. And you can have a relationship with him and go to heaven. And if you have a relationship with God, he will change all of Kachipo. He will bless you. He will protect you. He will make you love. And that is the good news.
Y'all just heard the very end of it. Of
Do
course,
any of you
this
want
was
to
a long
receive
conversation that we're explaining the gospel.
Anyone? Raise your hand if you want to receive Jesus.
There they go.
Would you like to pray with me? I will help you pray to receive Jesus. You follow as I pray.
So this format we kind of went through each spot that we went to. We kind of went through this. But later that afternoon, we went and we heard there would be dancing again, and we'd have an opportunity to talk to a big group. Unfortunately, that didn't happen later that afternoon either. This is a little bit about their water source, but everybody was still kind of nursing hangovers.
That was how you get water with those jugs there.
Okay, we're at the main source of water.
This is the main source for 4,000 people.
Miyun. And this is a little gully that brings the water down.
And the cows walk
women
through there.
will get the water out of this spring right here. And you can see that it's very clean here by comparison to everything else we've seen. But then the women and others are bathing, and it gets pretty dirty after this. But this spring,
Wow.
It took me an hour to
Alright,
get 5 gallons of water.
Is anybody squeamish?
I'm so close. Yes.
Okay. The next thing, and the reason I want y'all to see this is because this is something that every time they had an opportunity to tell us what they needed, the number one thing that they came up with was jiggers. And how they're spelled, how you spell it, and all that, we're not really sure. But the point about it is until it gets onto you, it's like a flea. They said, well, they fly, but they only fly about this high. Well, that's not flying, that's jumping. So they jump like fleas, and they're about the same size, and they look like a flea. Once they get onto your skin, normally it's on your feet, they burrow in between your toes or wherever. They burrow into your skin, and then they lay their eggs. So this is one that, and they apparently just spend their afternoon. Jig. It's kind of like a chigger, but
It is kind of
we
like,
thought they were saying
it's
chicken.
like a chigger that burrows in and then it grows like a big tick. Just imagine how big a tick gets on a dog.
Well,
It gets-
But when they pull it out, it's
lays
more like
eggs.
a worm. So
Yeah,
if
it's a
you're
maggot.
you don't want to look at this if you can't.
So here you go. Here you go.
and this is what they do for fun.
This is how you get a
Here
pedicure.
you go.
By the way, that's just a piece of wood that they borrowed our knife and whittled it to a little piece.
Here it comes. And you can hear them gasping because it hurts. Awesome. Why are you watching it, darling?
She can't not. It's like a train wreck.
Look at that.
Oh, it's the bad part. No.
Look at that. Okay, so if you don't get it out, it multiplies.
You'll hear Gabriel here soon.
Is it done? Yes. It's well. Is it over? That part.
If you don't get it out, it just multiplies. So there'll be dozens, hundreds of them in your
It's
feet.
painful. Does that hurt? Yeah. Does it hurt?
They really, it hurts.
That's a small one.
When it become, it releases the eggs inside. Yeah. When it become bigger, it bursts, and all the eggs, thousands of eggs from inside.
Big eye. It busts.
Okay, enough of that.
Yeah.
So the next, now,
Let me kind of tell you about this.
yeah, this is where we kind of split up.
So what happened was Mike's still, his feet are healing. And it was an easy call. We all made it. You're not going to the far village. This was the goal. The village out here, Kokumago, is the furthest settlement as far the Kachipo land as you can go. And there's 50 more miles to Ethiopia, but there's nobody. It's like nothing. And so we went this is the farthest village that you can go. I mean, if this is the wild, wild west, we're talking about, this is
the land that time forgot.
it is the land that time forgot. That is exactly what it is. And so you go there, and all of a sudden, after another, what was it, Dave?
3 or 4
3
hours.
hours, 3 or 4 hours of walking through tough stuff.
It was
and it was a
tough.
very hard
It was
walk.
a very hard walk.
we all of a sudden you come into this valley, and there's you see corn, and it's just like, oh, all of a sudden there's this little beautiful valley, and all of these, we actually stayed up here. There's a bunch of huts up there where the chief is, and as you see, we'll pan over here, you can see little groups of huts down in here in this village. There weren't many people in this village, probably 40 or so, and that's Joseph right there. Kokumago. We're up overlooking it. We just walked over this hill after 3 hours. 3 hours? Okay. So this is deep.
Oh yeah, they had the dog.
You can't go any further than this. So let me narrate here. We've traveled.
I think the cell cut out there.
Yeah, it does. This is where your phone.
Oh, my phone was messing up. Okay, I had so much sweat on my phone.
I just turned it off.
So okay, but Mike was super disappointed that he couldn't go here, and I'm gonna go ahead and tell a story about the chief. Mike was super disappointed he couldn't go on this, and but he needed to stay back because his feet were just bloody. I mean, he had to take care of them. You know, he gets infected down there, we're in big trouble because there's no medical care. So we had to let him take care of his feet. We left him in Miyun with all the drunk people carrying around AK-47s and all that stuff. But we had met enough.
He used to be a bartender.
I wanted to go. Just for the piece of
I mean, because they stay up carousing all night long. It's just crazy. So anyway, Mike had to stay. We thought we had good people around him. And I said, Mike, you know what? This is God doing this too. And we started talking about Simon. Simon's the guy who's the most powerful of all the Kachipo. He's the most powerful guy. He's the government guy that we had showed you earlier.
This guy.
The guy that interpreted for me earlier.
This
That guy in
bright yellow shirt.
Yeah, the bright yellow shirt. Well, Simon, he knows English. He's very powerful, very influential. He wanted to hang around with us all the time. And he and Mike kind of connected a little bit. I said, man, maybe God's got you staying here because of Simon. Why don't you share your testimony to him? Because Simon's a guy who had said he received Christ, but you can see his hands broken, and he had already been stick fighting again, and he's totally reinculturated back, in their culture, and didn't show signs of a changed life. And so Mike said, "Dude, I can speak right to that. That's my testimony. That's who I was." And so we go on this trip to this place, and Kokumago, and Mike stays back. And Mike gets to spend how many hours? I mean, he got to spend like 3 hours with Simon. Told him his testimony, and really just said, "Man, He just shared the gospel with him from a perspective that the guy could relate to. Listen very closely. The next day, Simon comes, and Mike gets up early, and he's having his quiet time. Simon comes, brings his Bible that he evidently had. Sits down next to him without saying a word and starts spending time in the Word and praying right next to Mike on that day. It's crazy that all this happened. So meanwhile, me and Dave are in Kokumago. And while we're there, it's like the land which time forgot. That picture that you were just about to show, you have that still?
Yeah.
The one with all the rock stuff. That was just kind of a little place where the chief of the tribe. We got there. We went straight to the chief's residence, and which is this area. That's his house right there. That's the chief's house.
Yeah, I want you to watch.
Look at this.
This was
Look at this.
low budget.
Look at this. This is where we're going to be staying. I guess is this where we're staying tonight? There's a Gabriel. That's Joseph. And there's Paul, and it's just rocks strewn around. It looks like something before time.
So
it was crazy.
Chad and I sleep right here.
We sleep right there. We stood up the tent right there, and we're touching distance from the chief's house. Okay, this is called his compound. So what happened was the chief, I'm just going to tell you the whole story, okay? The chief, this is stuff we can't tell Sunday morning, but this is crazy stuff. So the chief comes and eagerly is sitting there excited that we're there. And we can tell it on his face. And we come, and the guy looks a little, creepy. He's got like these, he looks Jamaican, doesn't he? He's got these braided beard. He's got this like braids in his beard that are hanging down like this. Well, we didn't see many guys with beards at all, but so it's a little bit interesting. So he's listening and wants to hear what we have to say. We're exhausted, and all of them are gathered. So I said, let's share the gospel. This is why we're here. So we went over there and began to share the gospel. Joseph, who's heard the gospel 5 or 6 times the day before, is sharing the gospel again. I've had plenty of practice now, and we've practiced together basically. And so I share the gospel fully, slowly, clearly as I possibly could. We took time. And this chief is sitting right in front of me, eating it alive. He wants to hear the gospel. And so the next day, we go and I'll let you tell about JB's Bible, okay? So the next day, we went down in the main part of the village, and they gathered again. We gathered most of the village together, and they all heard the gospel then. And the chief's sitting right in front of me, and he's holding this black chicken. Well, there probably weren't 5 chickens in the whole village. And we see this black chicken that he's holding, and he's grinning. And so we're talking and sharing the gospel with everybody. And I said, this time I asked if anybody would like to receive Christ. You've heard the gospel, you understand. Would you like to give your life to Jesus? I mean, made it really clear that this is leaving your old things to follow Jesus, leaving everything to follow Him, surrendering to Him. Say it in many different ways that I possibly can of what it truly means to be saved. And I said, who would like to do that? And his hand shoots up. I want to receive Jesus. And so we lead them in prayer. Afterward, he comes to me and David and he offers us this chicken. He gives this little speech about how he's so grateful that we came there. And he wanted to give us this chicken. Well, we gave him the Evangel Cube. We only had 3 of them. We gave him 1 of those. Please take this and remember the story that we told you about Jesus and share this with other people. Then this woman, an elderly woman in the church, because the chief had just lost his wife, and so they were still mourning the loss.
They were having her funeral that morning.
Yes.
But every morning, the women, they were mourning when we came into the village, but in the morning, first thing in the morning, they're screaming. You hear screams across the village, and so they're mourning.
It's ceremonial mourning. And so then this woman stands up who had been mourning. She stands up and she gives us this long speech that Joseph is translating and saying how thankful they are and that we've brought this good news and that we are so grateful. We've heard we thought that someone would be coming, and we're like, this is really crazy. This is really interesting that they thought someone would be coming with very important news. Well, anyway. Long story short, we ended up going back to Miyun where Mike was, and we're telling everybody that evening, Simon included, that what had happened. And we're talking about how we'd shared the gospel with the chief and how eager he was and how he gave us this chicken. Simon started laughing. And I said, why are you laughing? And Simon said, the chief 2 months ago, he's a prophet. And but he doesn't do magic. He's not a witch doctor. He just has dreams. And he said, the chief told us that, and y'all get me if I'm saying this right, that there were 2 people coming from far away with good news that's going to change everything. And that in my dream, I'm supposed to give them a black chicken. And he gave us this black chicken. We're going, what is this all about? And so basically, I believe that God had prepared him to hear the gospel, and that's why the guy was so eager and why he wanted to hear it. He's all smiles and he's all eyes and he's listening intently, and then he gives us this chicken. It was the craziest thing, guys.
And his wife had got killed 2 months before.
Yes.
In a skirmish, in a little tribal battle, but his wife had got killed. So.
Yes.
And so he delayed her funeral so he could hear our message. So it was really good.
Yeah. Tell about Joseph and JB's Bible.
Well, later that night, we get talking, and you could tell Joseph was kind of touched spiritually.
That's Joseph.
And so we started talking to him more and more, and telling him what his name was, what Joseph's role was in the Bible, how he delivered his people from bondage and how God used him and raised him up. So Chad's teaching him that story and telling him about it. And then I was prompted. I said, I feel like I want to give him my Bible. And it wasn't my Bible. It was, as we were leaving, I was trying to find a small Bible that would fit in a backpack. And so we dug everywhere and finally found one of my oldest son's Bibles, one of his old ones. So we opened it up and we ended up writing his name in it. And so it's Joseph Barchita or something like that. And so we wrote our names, wrote the dates, and then, the reason to change the world for Jesus. And so then we flip it over to the next page, and then it said JB's Bible.
That's his initials.
That's my son's initials. So my son had written that, ages ago, and I looked at it. I said, well, this is destined for you to have it because my son's initials and your son's initials are the same. So this is your Bible. JB's Bible. And so he literally started crying about it. He started crying.
You look at his eyes in the previous picture.
You can
Look
see.
at this. The dude was burning up. That Dave did great because David had some letters from people in his family that that they had hidden in his pack and stuff.
Really
so
cool.
that he found these letters, and so he asked him if he could read English, and of course every African's going to say, "Yeah, I can read English." So he said, "No, read this," and so he read like some of the letters just to prove that he could read English, and then Dave gives him this Bible, which y'all is the most prized possession now of this guy's life. Everywhere you go in South Sudan, the fields are white for harvest. I can't say that enough because they're craving the Bible. They're craving Jesus. They're craving God. It's not like here. It's the opposite of here.
Yeah.
They're dying for the Bible. They want the Bible. You bribe them with the Bible. It's crazy.
Well, and another story, it happened at the beginning of this, but it pertains right now. So when we were crossing the border into South Sudan on the IDD Expressway, we pull up to the main border gates, and there's 4 or 5 guards that came out of a little guard tower, and they all look gruff and angry and intimidating. And so the first thing they do is walk up to Dave's side of the car, and he's in the passenger seat of the car, and they get him out and walk him straight into the guard station like nothing said, just get out and go. And Chad and I looked at each other just kind of with this nod like,
Here we go.
okay. David's mentioned, like earlier that day or the day before, he said, when I get nervous, I kind of crack jokes and stuff like that. So they're pulling him out of the car, and I'm like,
I was afraid. I said, Lord, please don't let me say they stupid.
I know, because I always cut up when I get nervous. I said, Lord, please don't make me cut a joke. Please don't make me cut a joke.
And he had just put his knife in his pocket because we just
So
got
they
off the
said, you
plane.
got any weapons on you? They said, oh, I got a knife. I was like, oh dear.
so
I'm waiting for the cavity search. I'm
station.
watching for him to just drop his drawers and just go after it.
We're expecting him to already be getting strip searched at this point. And then the next guard comes up to my door, and I stepped out of the vehicle, and I didn't even have a chance to make it around my
No,
door.
he jerks him out of the vehicle.
Carol was like quick draw, reached like gadget arm into the back of the SUV and grabs she had a case of Bibles. And she had told us before we went on the trip, she said it's amazing how you can use a Bible as, what did she say, currency, I guess?
Currency.
So she hands me this Bible real quick, and I handed it to this guy real fast, and he went from rough and tumble, angry, intimidating guy to a kid on Christmas morning. You could see his face, and I actually just wrote this. I'm transferring my notes over, and I was writing about it, and I kind of expanded on it. I actually looked at the guy's face as I was handing him, and it was just like, you do this joke where it's, just like, just went from completely frustrated, angry to just happy and smiling, and pushed me back into the car, went and saved Dave from his search, put him back in the car, and was like, bye, bye.
That's what Holly World.
Yeah, it was, you would not believe the difference. So, Bible is currency. It just goes to show how hungry they really are and what that land needs. So, okay, so they come
There's
back.
the chicken.
Yeah, there's the chicken.
We ate it later that night.
Yeah. So while they're hiking back, this is that next morning, and I had just sat down, and Simon came walking, and he shook my hand. He said, "Good morning, how are you?" And then sat down right next to me, and I kind of just snapped that picture real quick because I knew how important that moment was, because I had no idea if he'd even listened to what I'd said the night before. I mean, we talked for a couple hours, and I basically spent over an hour, to the point where I almost thought I didn't want to push too hard, but I did anyway, telling this guy how wrong his tribe was for what they were doing, for the alcohol, for the promiscuity, for the stick fighting, keeping me awake every night. And I'm just basically telling this guy, hey, you guys, you've got to start with Jesus in this tribe. You can build all the churches you want, you can build all the schools you want, somebody's going to come burn it down right behind you unless you start in the beginning with Jesus. And so the fact that he came and sat down next to me, that was kind of my moment. And I had no idea that they're having their moment 4 hours away, feeling like they've accomplished their part, and I'm going, and so, and he's, everybody in the tribe needs him. So,
And he really is the figurehead of the tribe.
He's the most
He's the
important
most
chapter
powerful person of the tribe.
Yeah.
So anyway, he
It's huge.
gets
That's
called
just
away
so
a few
cool
minutes
because
later.
when we heard about the blisters, we met that afternoon and
Well,
we were
you know-
praying that God would use it,
He did.
And that's exactly what I was, because I had that whole. They left at noon, I guess, one day, and got back. Oh, there goes the contact. Got back at noon the next day. That's cool. Didn't happen the whole time we're in Africa, but it happened sitting right there.
That's good. 'Cause
So-
you're not got any still water.
It's happened before. So anyway, the fact that these two things were happening kind of simultaneously was
God
really
was-
cool. And then after this, I sat there for another couple hours, and then all of a sudden I hear, "Hey!" Jack comes walking up behind me, because the other thing is we'd all kind of had a little plan there
Yeah.
of, okay, if they're not back by a certain time, I call the Marines. And so I'm sitting there kind of going, all right, well, they should be back any minute. And sure enough, not too long
Well,
after that thought, they showed up.
Joseph, the one that led us, he was in front of us with a machine gun, AK, and his brother Clement was behind us. And Joseph had been shot at in the woods before, where they're trying to kill him. Another tribe's tried to kill him, so he had to run for his life one time. So as you're walking through these grassy things, if you ever watched a Vietnam movie, you're just imagining somebody popping up out of the grass and starting mowing you down. And so
Because it happens.
because it happens, so in their head is they're watching a lot. They're walking fast, but you can tell the lead guys kind
They're
of just
afraid.
they're kind of watching because they're worried about.
There's not
somebody
joking
popping up.
around going on.
No,
And
there's
the reason
no-
why we're hoofing it like we are is because the longer you spend in transit, the more of a target you are.
It's the same reason we drove that expressway that we were talking about as fast as we did, because the quicker you get through the danger zone to where you need to go, the better off you are. So this picture, before they got back from Cucamonga,
Kokomo.
however you say it. We've said it 30 different ways. I was sitting there after Simon got up and walked away. I'm sitting there reading my Bible, and I start hearing this whistling noise. And this kid had been kind of hanging around the campsite for 3 or 4 days, and at one point I had asked about him, and I was told that he was an orphan. Both of his parents were killed in a tribal conflict a couple of years before. Well, I hear this whistling, and I'm going, where did this kid get a whistle from? Well, if you look, what he's using is a spent, empty cartridge from an AK-47. So the irony with this picture for me, it kind of hit me pretty hard, was this kid is using a cartridge as a toy and has no idea that what's in his hand is
What killed
kind of
his parents.
symbolism of what created his situation of being an orphan. So,
Bullets are currency there. We couldn't buy honey, and because they didn't take South Sudanese money, it was meaningless to them. Dollars, they don't know what that is, but they asked if we had bullets. This will be 4 bullets.
yeah, a man with a case of 223 over there would make a killing.
Mm-hmm.
So Dave wanted me to take pictures of the cattle.
Well, they got rid of most of their cattle, but there were a few cows that come through later.
And they just randomly walk around. We had to keep shooing this yellow one out of our room.
It's trying to eat her food.
And the other thing is there's goats. Oh, there's the chicken.
It's just laying there.
And there's goats too that just, they'll walk right up to you. You know, I'm not
And we had goat.
petting them, but
You don't want to eat
no,
goat.
don't eat goat.
We had gazelle.
We had
That
greens.
was the worst.
You knew it was bad when they sit it on the table and all of a sudden you hear zzz, flies just start swarming around. You're like, oh dear.
This is a good meal right
Was
here.
it the last?
This was
meal?
the best meal, one of the best meals we had.
One of the last meals when we had the gazelle. They put it in the bowl. They put this big tub out on the table, and Chad's sitting next to me, and we both looked at each other.
It's rancid.
I mean,
We could
the
smell.
smell.
And he told me,
It looked
we were
good.
like,
I mean, the meat.
I've smelled it
Oh,
all.
so-
Yeah, we smelled it being cooked and it's
And I'm
rancid.
going, I'll eat about anything.
Oh, my favorite
Yeah, I was
scene
just-
was we're at the tribe and this guy comes in because there's no market in where we were up there on top. I mean, there was nobody selling anything. This guy comes in with beef jerky, some kind
That's
of
gazelle. It was dried gazelle.
dried gazelle, carried it in with flies all over it, trying to sell it to us for 3 bullets. 3 bullets, 3 bullets, 3 bullets.
No thanks.
So, festival, this is Saturday night, the festival went on and on. They showed back up sometime Saturday afternoon. We'd already figured out that we had to leave Monday. We had a plane waiting on us at a certain day and a certain time. We had to leave Monday because we calculated 2 days worth of walking. That puts us back on Wednesday afternoon. The plane was getting there Thursday morning sometime. But we'd still not been able to preach to any mass crowd at all. Because at this point we'd talked to maybe 100 people,
Yeah.
like a one, hut to hut or whatever else. And we kind of wanted a large audience just to at least get the word out. That was our main goal. We'd accomplished some things, but that's what we were trying the whole time. And every time we had an opportunity, everybody was drunk. So, we'd already said, Sunday morning, we are having a worship service. No matter what, we're having it, blah, blah, blah. And we wake up to this.
Monsoon.
So, I think there's a video of it somewhere where Chad actually says something like, we were ready to preach and not sure.
We didn't have David Aldridge. We couldn't tell what was coming.
Yeah, that's it.
It's Sunday morning, and it's 8 o'clock a.m. and we woke to this, I guess this would be considered a monsoon. That's where we are. We're going to have, David was ready to preach this morning, and we're supposed to be having church today, but we don't know what's going to happen. Maybe they'll interpret this as something that is a sign from God. I don't know. We don't know. But we're in the hut, and it's leaking. And it's driving rain out there.
It is amazing though how little it leaks.
Yeah, they're good
It
huts.
wasn't too bad. So about an hour later, rain stops, everything's muddy and nasty. But we noticed all these kids started gathering around. And this is Matthew, who works for
Hope Vision.
Hope Vision. He's the one that built the school a few years before. So these kids just started to gather around and started to sing worship songs.
Which everybody in the everybody in the whole town can hear this on Sunday morning.
And
It's basically an advertisement. Something's going
he
on.
kept it going. The guy in the hat, we realized wasn't very prepared for this, but he did keep it going. He realized that people would be able to hear it, and so he kept it going for a while. And then these younger guys started to show up, and the moms started to show up. So, this is only 1 minute. This is David.
There's 106 people in and ended up being here. And I wish I would have panned it, but there's people around this side over here. The adults are sitting far away, kind of interested.
This is 8 minutes. So
These are the teenage guys that I talked to earlier and shared the gospel with. These are the children right here.
There's Joseph with his Bible, new Bible.
With his new Bible.
And Gabriel
over
isn't
here.
part of this at all. He's just standing in front of everybody.
Yeah. and then over here are the teenage girls. And they separate. They just naturally separate. Boys and girls don't hang around, or men and women do not.
So
hang
I've
out.
got on video each one of us, and I think Dave's about 8 minutes, Chad's 6, and I'm about 7. And then we get into.
Did you hear that? I was the
He
shortest.
was the shortest one.
Did you hear that? I just want everybody to make sure you heard that.
Hey, they didn't even like my, Americans don't like my humor, and they didn't like it. I got up there and I said, in case you haven't noticed, I'm not a cachipo.
And it's just
Crickets.
wah.
I actually think one of the guys went,
I could see my wife
Right.
just rolling her eyes.
So we'll do this for a couple minutes. Dave, you're welcome to tell me.
No, you can speak up.
No friends. And
Sounds
Jesus
off.
came and met her there. And he asked her for a water. Jesus was of the tribe of Jews. Jesus was of the tribe of the Jews.
I've never heard the word tribe.
She was of the tribe of Samaria. They hate each other. They hate each other. Fight. But Jesus was kind and loving.
Yeah, go on. That's really bad preaching.
It's actually really good. He basically he told the story of the Good Samaritan, and that Jesus loved her, even though she was an enemy and she was a woman.
She believed that he was the Son of God. He was showing her that God loves our enemies. God wants you to know what he is like. You get to live with him in heaven when you die.
They don't believe in afterlife.
And to others
This guy right here
in the world.
is another incredible story. I
This
won't
is
interrupt the sermon there, but
Yeah,
that
go ahead,
guy,
stop.
what was his name?
And
Is it
to go to heaven.
is a
Santiago.
Spanish name?
Santiago.
Santiago. So Santiago there happened that day to walk in the village. He has been in Ethiopia. He was one of those kids that learned English in the school that had started there, and he had been in Ethiopia because they needed him with Wycliffe. There's already a Bible translation effort that started for the Kachipo people, and he is the Kachipo guy who is actually helping them translate the language, the Bible into language. It's a 6-year project, and they're into it 2 years, and they're sending him back to Juba to get his education, to do more education, so that he can then go back and help the thing speed up again. But he was coming to Juba from Ethiopia, and Wycliffe was sending him, and he happened to come right when we were there. We got all the information.
This trail goes right beside our hut.
Yeah. So he comes through there, and we get his information. We get to talk to him. We get to find out about this. We didn't know that there was a project going on of translating the scripture in Kachipo. But God's already at work, y'all. There's about 20 ways that God has already been at work. And it all kind of came together at the same time while we were there. We find out about all of these things really miraculously because he walks in while we're having this service.
So they've translated Matthew and Mark and Genesis. And
Some
so
of Luke.
They're trying to finish the rest of it in 4 more years.
America has been praying for where God wants us to go. And God has used us to help people in other parts of the world to know about Jesus. Because He is the only thing that matters.
We don't know what somebody's doing.
Banging on the pot.
Our life on this world is this long, very short. But after we die, we live somewhere forever.
See, David says, we found out while we were in Kukumago that I asked Joseph, I said, what is the tribal belief about after you die? What happens next? And he had a hard time understanding the question, so we repeated it. And he said, there's nothing. I said, you mean so you just die like an animal and there's nothing? It just, life is over? There's no afterlife? He said, that's right, there's nothing. So we find out that that's the standard belief. That's what people believe. So when we found out that, we're talking about eternal life. We're talking about there is life after this life. And people are like, whoa, okay.
There's no signs of any kind of worship. I mean, so there wasn't like, I mean, there was just like no worship, no thought of God, and no thought of afterlife.
Which
so
is
it's
very
really,
unusual for
culture.
For a culture.
When Jesus comes in, He gives you power to do good, not bad. You had welcomed us to see your festival.
I was about to go hunt that person down.
The whole time.
Somebody, they're beating a pot somewhere over there.
To meet you of this place.
Listen to that bird, don't you wait.
And because of your kindness, and because of how
Bird
wonderful
is-
you are, we love you very much. We love you because God has sent us to you. So
So guys, let me go ahead and say, Dave, why don't you tell about some of the needs, just as a warm up for Sunday, just some of the things that they need as a.
I guess one thing that God really opened my eyes is that you really don't realize how much God's word and God's truths affect a culture. And then when you go to a culture that has no knowledge of God's word, God's truths, God's ways, God's forgiveness, it's just amazing what happens and how bad things become. And so it really broke my heart because they don't know. They haven't been shown. And that's why I kept hearing the word, go you into all the nations and make disciples. Not just preach a sermon, not just do this, not just do, but make disciples. Because how did Jesus make disciples? He lived with them and for 3 years. I mean, he's trying to make these people into Jesus followers and teach them his ways. And so it really kind of convicted me that, we really need God's presence through a local church, continually teaching, preaching, training, because they've got hundreds of years of cultural ways that are not the ways of God. So it is going to be a very hard and very challenging work, but you could see the hunger in those kids' eyes. We didn't see it in any adults, I'm going to tell you that. There was no adults whatsoever that had any interest in the things of God that I could see.
Yeah, they wanted to do that.
So, I mean, if you were over, I want to say 25 or 30, there was just no interest in that. So the greatest need is for us to find a pastor, support a pastor, and then get the church established and then look towards building a structure later. That in there, the tribal leaders kept saying, we want a church, and they were thinking of a concrete building.
Yeah.
And, but we were talking of people. We gotta get people. And that's kind of our heart. That's the greatest need, is to get a church, get some believers, get a pastor, and then that would develop. Then the second need is, medical. I mean, there's nothing medical whatsoever. So the things they deal with, they just deal with them. And there's so many things that, just to give an example, jiggers can be treated as simple as with Vaseline.
Mhm.
Vaseline smothers them, they can't breathe, they come back out of your skin. It's
So
just,
crazy other, crazy.
we're in Ethiopia
Yeah.
airport. I see a brother over there reading the Bible.
It's the only place to sit in the whole restaurant.
We sat down beside and I said, no, we noticed you're reading the Bible, are you a believer? And we get talking to him, and he's a doctor with
Doctors
Without Borders.
Tanzania.
And he'd been building a church. He showed us pictures of church he'd been building. And we said, you know anything about jiggers? He said, oh yeah, I worked with jiggers for years. And so he gave us all kinds of advice and, things to do. And so he was very helpful in that. So that was neat.
I've got a list. We asked for a list of diseases and conditions
Yes.
that they needed. And I need to give you that for Sunday.
Yes.
And they list, most of them are easy treatable things. That you can go, we could take a medical trip just from people in our church and treat most of the things on that list and make a huge difference, like in a week. I mean, you can make a huge difference. So there's that.
And so the other needs are, water. And when it takes an hour to get 5 gallons of water, there's a problem. There's a problem. And you don't realize, but these women are walking, and they're spending an hour to 2 hours a day just trying to deal with water. And, it's just tough. I mean, it's tough.
It's dirty water.
Dirty. I mean, it's just, nasty. So, I'm sure they have so many health issues, medical issues because of the water they're drinking. So, they've got a few little sources, but we need to capture more water, maybe do some solar to pump some water up and try to work with water. So we can make it better. We may not be able to make it with showers and everything, but we can make it a lot easier just to fill containers. And so I'd like to work with that with some other people, and we kind of develop a plan on that. And then medical, coming in on. The other things is just, hygiene. Lower Boma, there was a lot of organizations there that were just teaching people how to wash hands, how to take baths, how to use soap, just basic stuff you don't even think about, but they just don't know. And, get the cows out of the water you're drinking. I mean, just so simple things that they don't know, and so we can help them in those ways with hygiene education. The other big thing was what I'd love to see is they starve to death 3 months out of the year because they have no way and they don't understand how to preserve food. So it ain't like they got pressure cookers and they got other things like that. But I really do think you could do some kind of pressure cooker and put those in mason jars and keep a lot of the stuff that's there. There is no problem in growing, none whatsoever.
3 growing seasons.
They can grow corn that's 10 foot tall 3 times a year in 9 months. The ground is unbelievable. Incredible. However, the way they plant the corn, I mean, it's just a waste. I mean, there could be so much efficiency, it'd be unbelievable. And they could have so much food. Boma doesn't have much food. They could sell all that produce and stuff down in Boma and then Juba, the capital. But there's no roads. So that's another thing. So what Chad and I, we worked and we tried to figure out, all of us tried to figure out how do we get people in there sooner, because the way we went, there's not many people, can go and definitely don't want to go. It's a tough path. But we found there's an airport about 45 minutes, an airstrip that's about 45 minutes away. It's a grass one, but it's a huge one. They say they landed big planes in the military conflicts and things like that. But the grass grows so fast that by the time they hand sickle it down, the time they get down the runway, it's already grown up another foot or 2. So it's hard to get it clean. And so we're going to try to work on some ways of talking the tribe in, maybe getting some sickles to them so they can sickle it down so we can actually land and hike in 45 minutes, because most people can handle that. And it's a lot safer on that side of the trail. because that's the Kachipo tribe in between there. So that creates a lot of safety. And then the other thing is nobody can go for 3 weeks. It's just too much.
It's just too taxing on time. You can't leave work. These guys had to leave work, and it's an incredible sacrifice for an American to leave the country for 3 weeks. Not to mention the expense.
Yeah.
So what we're talking about doing is how can we make it a 2-week trip or even less.
10 to 14 days, get you in, get you out, build safer, and then start making some groundwork that will make a difference. And those kind of things that we do will get, I think, the tribe more interested into hearing who are these Jesus followers and seeing that God brings love and justice and joy and peace and so hopefully start learning the ways of Christ and changing the whole culture.
Another thing that we did was, the media was at the airport when we got back to Juba. So we had newspaper and we had Juba's news. We had the South Sudan news station that was waiting for us when we got to the airport. And so we knew, they told us there's going to be, because somebody was on the phone, so Gabriel said the news is going to be there. And so I said, we were talking on the plane. I said, guys, let's think about what we need to say, because the South Sudanese government's going to hear this. And so all of us, these guys did so well. I wish we could find that somewhere. But they did so great because they interviewed all 3 of us. And basically what we wanted to do was to say, how can the South Sudanese government help? We need roads there. We need a road there. And we need security. They have to have security because, the South Sudanese government, if they want to help these people, they've got to be able to allow them to have some protection from the fighting and the raiding and the things going on there. So it was a very successful trip for that reason too. I barely missed the Secretary of Religious Affairs or whatever. We missed him. Like, just didn't know he was in the same place that we were, and he was there to see us, and we just missed him. But Carol has a relationship with him. The other thing that's great is that, and I'll try to conclude just, and we can show more pictures. That was a low point right there, man.
Just stop on that one.
Oh, if you only knew how much we were hurting right there. But the great news is this. Okay, so there's a Bible translation already in progress. We have the government's attention, we believe, for hopefully that'll develop into some security and perhaps even a road. We've got an airstrip that we know about now. We can use that airstrip for sure during the months of the drought, when it's not the rainy season. So we know that that's possible. We understand what some of the real physical needs are. There's needs, as David said, there's needs for doctors, there's needs for water, and a water project would be a good mission trip. There's needs for teachers. So they want to know English. So an English teachers would be a great thing. Food preservation, things like that. Then we know this, that Favor Africa they told us in no uncertain terms, when we came back, we had a greatest meeting with Carol and with some of the leaders of Favor Africa, which, by the way, that organization, they prayed for us the entire time. This group of staff, I wish we could just take our staff, Stacy, and just see what they do.
They're unbelievable.
They wake up early in the morning. They have one day that they fast all day as a staff. But then every single day of the week, and these are people not getting paid a whole lot, they come there to the house of prayer. And they're there at 8 o'clock in the morning, or they're in trouble, but that's not a big deal because they're excited about being there. And they have a 2-hour worship service. And it's cranking the sound up as loud as you possibly can. It's bouncing in that room. I mean, it's just like, whoa. And but they're praising God and shouting and loving God, talking about how big God is, how He can move mountains, how great He is. It's just what they sing about. And it gets me emotional because I sit there and I think about how this is their staff meeting. And they're praising God, and then they pray, and they pray, and they pray. And they prayed for us the whole time we were there. We came back, we were like heroes. When we walked in, here are these people that have given up their lives.
This whole thing up.
And they'll make us sit in the front. It's an honor culture there, and that was one of the things that it's a struggle because they all want to serve you, and if you try to serve them, it's almost like you're offending them. And so it's an honor culture. And they're praying for us and shaking our hands like we're celebrities and telling us how thankful they are that we went and how much it means to them. How many times did we hear when we were there, certainly when we were at Kakumago, that was what that old woman said, that she was so impressed that we had walked all that way to see them, because, you know, white people don't do this. You know, you walked all this way to see us. We know this is important. And so it meant something that we had to make that long journey. Now in the future we won't have to do that, hopefully, because it's hard to get trips there, you know, to do that. And it's very, very dangerous. So, you know, we're grateful that the follow-up, though, the most important follow-up is that, and the biggest mission accomplished thing, and then you guys will ask questions and y'all can chime in on whatever you want to talk about, but is this. Favor Africa, within a month, will be back there in Miyun to do a PBS, a portable Bible study. That goes on for 3 months, so they will have from that staff.
2 months.
2 months?
2 months, it's 5 to 6 hours a day, 5 days a week.
They'll bring a staff of people there to teach everyone who wants to learn what the Bible is all about and how to be a disciple and basic doctrine, basic Christianity. And they'll also learn English for 2 months. And then they'll go back, and then a couple months later they'll come back again and do 2 months of health and, what was the other one? Like health and cleanliness and that kind of stuff, hygiene, stuff like that. So just healthcare kind of stuff of how to do basic things.
Carol
Favor
says
Africa.
next week.
Huh?
This text that I got from Carol says, and this was this past Monday, said Gabriel is working on getting a PBS started in Kachipo by next week. So these people don't mess around.
No,
I mean,
they're coming behind us, guys.
and that's Gabriel.
They're coming behind us. They're taking advantage of this opportunity. And as soon as through the PBS, a pastor, somebody starts revealing himself to be a leader and spiritually mature, they will ask him to be a pastor. And we as a church will have an opportunity, and it won't cost us hardly anything. I'm talking about like a couple $100 for a year, a couple $100 a year to support this pastor. And to give him a place to live, a cow, and a little place where he can grow his own food. And then we have supported a pastor. And then we have this other organization that will help us when the church becomes about 100 or 200 people, and they meet certain degrees, which we want certain benchmarks to be met to be a church. It's a disciple-making church. This organization has promised to come and help build a brick building, which will be the only brick building within 100 miles of this place. And guys, this doesn't happen. This kind of thing just doesn't happen. I can't tell you how big a deal this is and how God has put things in place for us to be able. He's answering our prayers, is what he's doing. So,
I mean, to see everything orchestrated the way it was, I had no, and you and I had no clue. We didn't even have a clue what we were getting into. You had somewhat, but you hadn't been to that area. You just been to Favor Africa.
Yeah.
Or Uganda. Did you go to that?
Well, I went to South Sudan, but not like this.
Yeah. So it was just amazing to see this Hope Vision team, Gabriel and the general. I mean, there were so many situations would not have worked out if God's providence hadn't guided us through there.
Every day, multiple times a day. Yeah. And y'all, that's why we want to thank you for praying.
Yeah.
Because there were so many times when we're walking and when we're wondering if we're going to make it, that I said, Lord, I know people are praying. I know people are praying. Mm-hmm. And I'll give you a little crazy example of that. Okay, Jen, I'm going to tell your story. Where's Jen? Yeah. So here she is. So Gabriel, the day before we met Gabriel, he and the guy that ended up robbing everybody walked from what was the name of the city?
Juba?
No, it was...
To Lower Boma?
No, it was the city in between. It's hard. Capueta. That he had walked to Capueta, and Capueta met that other guy, and they together walked, and we flew over this land, y'all. It's desolate, but there is a definable trail. They walked on a trail.
For 3 days.
For 3 days. And kept seeing behind them something, and had a feeling that there was something behind them. They're desolate road, no human being, no civilization, nothing. They're walking between these two towns. And while they're walking, by the way, when you see a road, that means a trail this wide is what that means. So they're walking from Quipueta to Boma, and here's what's going on. They see something behind them. They keep seeing something behind them in the brush. And so finally, they're getting nervous because they think it's a dog, because it's 50 yards back, and they keep, you're aware, you're looking to see what's going on. These are Africans, they know to watch out for stuff. And so he basically set it up so he could go around a curve and see what was coming. It was a lion. So a lion had been following these guys. Staking them, following these guys. And they were able to see this lion, and then they hustled to get to the next town. Jen tells me when I get back, and this is insane, but Jen tells me that she's praying. And what day was it that you were praying?
He's telling us story. I'm like, when did this happen? Because this is crazy. I had to write it down because it was so crazy, and I went back and looked. It was Saturday, July 12th at 3:20 p.m. I got this sudden urge to pray. And it wasn't necessarily to pray for you guys, you three. It was to pray for the people that were going to be helping you guys, or in the village, or somebody that had to do with
The mission.
the mission. You guys are going to run into somebody, and specifically lions, and just that God was in control of everything, and just whatever spiritual attack was going on. And it was so bizarre. Because who prays for that? Like, seriously, that doesn't happen. And so I wrote it down, it was so bizarre, and that's when I said to Chad, when did that happen? Because I had this, it was just, I wrote it down because it was bizarre.
So she sends me the text that it was the 12th.
Yeah.
That was while he was walking from Quipueta to Moma. So there's 100 of these. There's 100 of these that are like that, and you can't tell this to everybody. And you know what, guys? If you said that around Americans, they're all going, right. But the truth is, in Africa, when you're on mission, and when you're sticking your neck out, and when you're giving your life to follow Jesus and to accomplish His Great Commission, this stuff almost gets normal.
Over there,
it's normal, and that's why
their
Carol's
faith
kind of
is
crazy.
unbelievable.
You know?
You don't have to be.
Yeah,
And
because stuff
they
like this
see
happens.
things like that so often. And it really, for me, we don't take the time to notice it in America. And it probably happens just as much, but we don't take the time to notice it. But within the first 3 or 4 days there, I can't keep up with writing, all the different things. But if you just step back after a couple of days of being there and go, wow, okay, we could have been dead 4 different times by now, and all the reasons why that didn't happen. And then after a while, halfway through the week, we're kind of like laughing about it. It's like, okay, what miracle is going to happen in the next hour? Is the sky going to part? All kinds of stuff. But it was really, really eye-opening.
And I want to say again, I can't compliment these 2 guys more. They went with the flow. There was never any complaining. And believe me, there was all kinds of opportunities for complaining.
It's kind of hard to complain when you're praying. I couldn't complain because I was busy praying just to get through the next hour or day or whatever it was. Because there was some times I don't give up easily on anything, but there was a couple times when I was just straight up prayer. That's the only thing that got me through. Now I think you even mentioned the fact you shouldn't have let me call her at a certain time, but when we finally got to that village, I was just like, we made it!
And you know what? That was a low point. I was like, you shouldn't have called her right now, because his voice was like, oh, we're fine, really, I promise.
No, Mike has cried once ever in the 7 years we've been together, so he's not an emotional person. It was it was a bad moment.
Well, guys, the thing that touched me is when you think of how much God loves.
Yeah.
When Jesus stepped out of heaven to serve us.
Yeah.
It was hard for me as an American and so rich, and to try to, it was nothing compared to what Jesus did, and how He stepped out of heaven and lowered himself to become obedient, even death on the cross, for the joy set before him to please the Father, to obey him. And the whole time I'm like, God, Jesus, can you live through me? Can I wash the feet with jiggers? Can I hug these stinky people? I mean, can I pray for them? Can I love them? Can I not look down on them? Can I die to myself? It's just like, it's amazing what Christ's done. And it takes, it's hard to look at the suffering and the sadness, and you're like, Jesus, if you don't change my heart, I'm a selfish American, and he has to do the work in you. And like Chad said, the whole month leading up to this, I'm not a fearful person. I know I'm a crazy person like Chad, but I had to really get my heart right to say, are you okay with dying? Are you okay with the unknowns? Can you become free and live as a dead man? And that's where I had to get to myself, where I could just say, God, I love you. I don't know what you're doing, but if you want to take my life, that's okay. And there was a lot of nights, Krista she'd just see me crying. And she was, what's wrong? I said, I don't know. I said, but I gotta be ready to die. And I said, I don't want you to fear, but I said, I've got to get to a point where let goods and kindreds go, this mortal life also, the body they may kill, God's faith abideth still. And it's hard, guys. We're all selfish, and we don't realize how selfish and how American culture, we look at, when we step out of our culture, another thing God kept showing me, it says, well, you think this culture's messed up. Your culture's messed up. You think it's bad you're drinking out of cow crap water. He says, but what are you watching on TV? What are you watching in the movies? What are you listening to? What's your entertainment? You're drinking crap too, but you're drinking it a different way. And you don't see it. And you don't know you're sick. You don't know you're sick because you're in a culture that can't see it. And they're in a culture that can't see it, and we're in a culture that can't see it. And it's like, God, forgive me for not being hungry for you. God, forgive me for being satisfied with you. God, forgive me. Forgive me. And so, and so I want to encourage all of you. There's times in your life where you're going to have to step out of your own culture. And I would encourage you to go and do these things, because Honduras is the same way, and other places are the same way. But you see things, and you see blind spots, and you see ugliness of your heart. You see things in your heart that you're like, and you're like, okay, God, I know you see them all the time. And can you change my heart? And it's hard. As soon as I come back, you're back in the culture in a rat race, and it's different. And so I'm trying to work hard to say, God, how can I change my heart? How do I change my passions? How do you let go of money? How do you let go of time? How do you go serve the needy in our own area? How do you go love the poor? And so those are the challenges that I think God's trying to work on me and hopefully all of us. But I just want to encourage everybody, when you get an opportunity to go do things like that, it's great you're serving them, that God's going to use. These Christians, I felt so, go back to his hug, I felt so, I don't even know what I was thinking. I honestly didn't know Grass Hut still existed. I couldn't even fathom that. But Gabriel's like, hey, I want to show you my house when I get back. And he was all excited, and I was like, I don't know what I was thinking. I was thinking of a brick building, a nice, decent house. And so we end up going to his house. You're going backwards, aren't you?
we ended up going to his house at the end, and he's purposely chosen to live in a refugee area for his tribe, and about 15 people live in this and another little hut
Which is
right
smaller
beside
than
it.
this room. Smaller than this room.
This is his whole family back here. This is a church member, but Chad, me, and David took this picture, and then everybody else, this is all his family back here. And all of them live in that and that hut.
That's the last thing we did before we got on plane.
And I said, Gabriel, where do you get water? Well, it's about an hour that way and an hour back. And he's purposely chosen to live in this refugee land that they just kind of gave it to this tribe. And he's with his people, so he can minister to his people. And I was like,
Yeah, they offered him a house in town.
He said no.
Favor Africa was going to rent him an apartment in town for him and his children and his wife.
And he is a godly,
said no.
godly, very wise servant of God. And he's the guy that Jen prayed for without knowing it. That was being followed by the line. That we could not have done it without it. We couldn't have done it. He's an amazing guy.
and his gift was peace. He's a peacekeeper. I mean, and he brought all kinds of peace between chiefs and other people not getting arrested. I mean, he was constantly trying to bring unity.
Yeah, this is one that you probably don't want to see the bad side of. But you know, another lengthy story. But Paul actually saved our life, and we didn't even know it until the next day or the day after that. But when he was telling the story, somebody kind of tried to tell him that he was wrong for the way he handled the situation, and he got pretty upset.
He said, "You don't understand what happened." And we were trying to make it out in there what had happened, because we could tell there's intensity going on here.
And they're in a different language we didn't understand. Yeah. They're kind of going back and
forth.
forth.
They're mad at each other like.
And the story he was telling, just real quick, was when we got to when we were
on the way back home,
back from the
9-hour trip.
Cachipo pit.
We had some young teenagers that were escorting us, and they were toting guns, but they were from a Gia tribe, which is a different tribe that doesn't really get along with the Malay tribe, which is who was basically, we were on their land. And so when we were all kind of dispersing to go to bed, they'd given us a nice hut to stay in. And Paul looked at me, and I said, Paul, where are you going to sleep? He said, well, I'm going to go sleep with these boys. Because they wouldn't let him sleep in the compound. They made him sleep outside of the gates, because they knew that there might be an issue. And I said, well, Paul, if you change your mind, you're welcome to come back and sleep in the hut with us. And he said, I can't change my mind. I thought that was just kind of weird the way he worded it. I don't know if you heard him say that or not. Well, come to find out, the next morning, before we even woke up and got going, the opposing tribe had shown up like fully loaded to the hilt with guns and RPGs, rocket launchers and stuff, ready to kill all those boys that walked us back, because
they thought were in the compound where we were.
So they were going to blow up the whole compound where we were sleeping nicely, and the people they were after weren't really even there.
They just happened to go by that school, and Paul.
But they happened to walk the same direction where Paul and them were in the school.
So where he said, I can't change my mind and come back and sleep comfortably. To harm us, and talked him off the cliff, so to speak, and found out who the leader was, and kind of, you know.
And the leader of that tribe ended up being in the military with him years ago.
Had served in the same unit.
And we didn't even know this until we were already home, and it was like a day or two later, not home here, but home to Boma, and he's telling the story of what he had done, and we didn't even understand.
We
what
didn't
he was
know what had
telling
happened
at all. And then because he was telling, Matthew said, well, you were on someone else's land, you have to tread lightly when you're on someone else's land, blah blah blah. And so we kind of picked up on that part, and I'm going like, well, maybe this guy's right. And Paul just kind of bucked right back up and was like, no. Basically what I did was save everybody's life, and it was It was interesting, but the moral to the story is, again, one of those things that we didn't find out until days later what had happened, that God was already, on the forefront, way ahead of us. And to add to what David was saying, I didn't know why I was called to go on this trip until I was there. You could ask me, hey, why are you going? And I'm going to reach the Kachiko people, blah, blah, blah. But I truly didn't really know why God was calling me to go on this trip. I had no idea. But the lesson that I learned from all this is one word, just obey. It's like you were talking about how, we get caught up in all these things and then you have an opportunity to go on a mission trip. But I didn't know why I felt I needed to go. Yeah, cool, I'm a camper and I like to hike and whatever else, but also I didn't really want to die. I would have, but I don't have a death wish. But until they went further on to the next village, and I was left behind, I was kind of bummed. I mean, I even told Chad, I said, I hate this. I want to go. And he said, you're not going. I went, I know. and even that, as they're walking away, I walked in like to the edge of the village or whatever else, and I'm kind of kicking rocks, like, oh, shucks. But then once I realized the time that I had to spend with Simon.
The most important Kachipo man alive.
The most important.
Yeah, and so the next morning, when I got a chance to speak in front of the whole crowd, it was kind of weird. I just opened my mouth and God let it flow, because at that moment I'd figured out why I'd gotten on the plane, it's 14 hours and walked 60 miles and gone through all this pain and heartache and all this other stuff. That moment I knew, and I didn't know until, what was I, like day 14 of 20 or 15 of 20. So over halfway through the trip before I really figured out why I was there.
And it was awesome.
I'd obeyed that far. And that's my biggest takeaway, I guess, of the whole trip is if you feel a call, you may not know why, but it's just the same as if you're standing in the line at McDonald's and, an opportunity to preach the gospel to somebody just standing in the line at McDonald's or 5,000 miles on the other side of the earth. Take those opportunities, because that's the biggest lesson for me.
It's awesome.
Take it. Don't hold back, because I didn't know, and it was revealed eventually, but up until it was, I'm just kind of flying blind going, okay, here I am, let's go.
And guys, that's one of the lessons as I was walking through these trails, let me back up. The Bible never came more alive. The Psalms never came more alive than being over there. I'm just telling you. You read Scripture in a different lens when you read the Psalms over there. But one of the things as we were going through these trails, Jesus says, "Thy word is a lamp unto my feet." And if you've ever had an old lamp, they don't shine a light too far. They just give you enough to see a little bit ahead of the time. And so, and I was thinking about as I was following these guys, I'm like, man, it's like following Jesus. If I need to stay close to him, because if I slow down, he disappears. And so, as I go through those trails, I kept thinking about that, and just how our hearts, we need to be close to Jesus, and he'll direct us which way we go, because if we don't, we get lost. If you get lost, you get alone. If you get alone, you get killed. And so it just,
so many things like that.
I knew there was a real reason we put you in the back. David walks like the African.
Yeah, it's like David.
He's gone.
David's on a mission, man. He'll get on it, and if he's with the Africans, they'll say, "Oh, good, they can keep up with him." Here they go. But it lasts not very long.
Pulling each other along.
I'm like, pace not race, David. Pace not race. And we're kind of reminding him because he's reminded me. Y'all have questions? We could do this on and on and on. It was incredible.
So they didn't have a God. Did you ask them, who made their mountain? I mean, what kind of questions were asked to determine that?
They believe in God. They believe in one God. But it wasn't that they didn't believe in God.
Oh, okay.
They just didn't believe in anything happening after life. So when life ends, it's over.
But I didn't see any worship.
No.
I just
No,
I
there
don't
was
think
no
they
worship.
knew-
It wasn't like there were idols or false temples, or they did talk about, they do have like village witch doctors, but it's just magic and hoodoo and, kind of superstition stuff. Yeah, well,
Voodoo.
it's voodoo. It's like superstition stuff. And it's not, there's an awareness of God. You never had to argue with anybody about God. God, oh yeah, we believe in God. But it wasn't, there wasn't an afterlife. There's just nothing after this life. That was interesting to me because I've never seen that before.
I wasn't
Usually
expecting that.
Yeah.
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 Even the demons believe in God.
Yeah.
It's like, whew.
Anybody else?
What questions do you feel like we're gonna get on Sunday? I guess since you guys are.
After Sunday.
Well,
Chad
I'm
will
gonna
just
do
get a
this in
bunch of
20 minutes.
emails. I'm just wondering how y'all are gonna condense this into 20 minutes.
What did you name the chicken?
Did we name it? You named it.
Surely you did.
Probably rubber.
I can't remember. Well, we gave
All I could think about is a Chick-fil-A sandwich. God, I love Chick-fil-A. I just want a Chick-fil-A
David
sandwich.
did two things, man, the whole time. Well, he did more than that, but he did two things that I'm thinking about here. One was he kept early in the trip, and this is very common for your first big mission trip, is he was talking a lot about in America, we do this, or in America, we do this. And it's about halfway through the trip, he's like, you know what? I need to quit saying this. Because it's, they can't comprehend. Like one time we asked Joseph, what's your favorite food? And he never even asked that question to himself before. And he said,
We only have corn.
we have, I guess, corn. Because they've got 5 foods, that they eat. That's
3
it.
of them are corn.
Yeah.
And not just sweet corn, we're talking cattle corn.
Yeah, it's cattle
corn
corn.
for cows.
It's gritty, white, not sweet.
Chew on it for 10 minutes, then swallow it.
But we were thankful for it because it was something that was clean.
And every protein came with the bones,
Yeah.
no matter what.
Chopped randomly.
Fish, chicken,
Goat brains, goat
all the
everything.
bones included. Every
Did
bit.
you say no to
Awesome.
that? Or would it offend?
Huh?
Did you say no to the meat?
That
or
was the
would it
hard
offend?
thing. There were a couple of times when it was so bad that we just said, I'd usually try to eat a little
Yeah,
bit
Chad
of
would eat most
but
of
these
these.
guys, because I'm hungry, man.
I would
But these
kind of do
These
that.
guys would say, they say, no, I'm full, really. I'm good. I'm good. We hadn't eaten in a day, I'm good.
I'm all pale and bleeding over. I'm full. I ate 2 days ago.
Then they sneak over and get a protein bar.
I had a lot of juice.
Your stomach's just churning. I'll tell a bad story on me. This is the funniest story. Chad can sleep through anything. I was his honeymoon tent mate in there, and so
I cannot.
I mean, he slept through everything: gunfire, women screaming, crying. I mean, I probably got 2 to 4 hours of sleep every night. So I'm praying all night long, just thinking. Chad's just, he don't wake up, does he? It's unbelievable. Don't wake up. Well, it was late towards the end of the trip. My stomach was upset. I'm upset, and we're in these tight little tents. I didn't want to wake anybody up, and I'm like, gosh, I don't want to pass gas. I don't. I said, it's probably going to be bad. I said, because I know it's going to be bad because my stomach. And I said, well, Chad, he probably won't wake up. He'll never wake up. So I lightly passed gas.
Lightly.
In about, it wasn't 10 seconds later, he goes, oh my gosh! I can't breathe! I can't breathe! Brewster, open that tent! This is zipping it out, trying to get it out. He didn't wake up one time, except that one time. He said, oh my gosh, I'm about to die. He was tore up.
I can't believe you told that story.
My wife told me, she goes, don't you tell that story. I said, it was so funny though, my stomach was so upset.
I still have your nose hair.
It was priceless. I wish I had that on video. Oh my gosh, what is that?
Yeah, David and I got real close. Like we're sleeping.
He
and-
touched me.
and
Oh,
our
don't
sweaty,
touch me.
our sweaty arms are touching. You don't go underneath your covers or anything. you just.
We only have like 2 inches between us, you know.
And,
We're
and then
just,
you turn,
God.
like, and his face is right here. So, and these snores are loud, but the crazy thing is, wouldn't it? This happened. The worst mosquito bites we got.
because you didn't want to be right beside another man, you know, so you're trying to stay away
Get as
from
close
him.
to the edge
So
as
you
possible.
lean against the tent,
So
and the
your rear
mosquitoes
end's
are biting
pushing
you
the-
through the tent.
So your rear end's touching the side of the tent, and the mosquitoes are just killing you right there, man. It's like, golly. It's misery. But anyway, other questions. Seriously, y'all, anything.
Did they have any problems, like, with you taking their photos?
They really didn't.
The only people that had
The
problems
tribe did it
was
all.
the lady in front of the Episcopal church
Yeah.
that yelled at him. And the next day, he was determined he was going to take a picture.
They got me good. So I'm out there. I said, "Oh, nobody's here. I'm gonna get a picture." About that
He
time, I'm about
gets
to take
over there
a
and gets
picture.
a picture. I
He
went,
goes, I'm looking around. I thought, "Oh my gosh, I've offended somebody," and it was them in the car yelling. It scared me to death.
Great.
Did you get a picture of the guy that gave you the chicken?
Yeah, actually, I don't think we do.
You don't.
No,
I
that
was
was the
looking
chief.
for it, and it's my fault. Because David didn't
My
have his
phone
phone.
was
I was the
dead.
one with the
Hey,
camera.
something did because I saw him with his
You did?
braids. I saw something.
With the dreadlocks and his
Yeah.
Okay, well, maybe we'll
It
find
must be on your phone because I
Um,
remember seeing that picture.
did y'all see the picture where there was the three of us and we had two African guys in the middle?
Mhm.
Those are the two most important Kachipo men in South Sudan. And one of them had the hat on, the little short guy. He was a chief.
I called him JJ for good times.
And the other one was.
He looked like
the other,
Muddy.
of course,
He
was
looked like
Simon.
Muddy
We spent
Waters.
so much time with him. And both those guys are. The chief told us. He said, "Please, we'll give you any land here. We'll give you anything you want. Come back, please." I mean, he's begging us to come back. He said, "You can build anywhere you want." That's him. And,
That's the chief, and that's the chief administrator. That's Simon and.
I've got his name written down. It's hard to.
Do y'all know how old the chief was? I can't remember.
I think he knew Moses. But I'm not
Actually, he's probably about my age. And
I mean,
Those
they
guys-
live rough.
I don't know Moses, but they look a lot older than they are because life's so hard, so hard.
What's their average lifespan?
I don't even know.
I think
I didn't see
at
many
one
old.
time
I
somebody-
didn't see many old men.
No.
yeah,
Did you?
somebody said late 40s.
Now some of the women.
40, dang.
I saw a woman breastfeeding. Did you see a woman breastfeeding at that church? She's probably 60 something.
Wow.
Ooh.
Oh gosh, it was awful.
Yeah, there were some older women there. I didn't know.
That image will never leave my mind.
It was.
Yeah, zero temptation.
Very
at all.
scarred.
Yeah, there was no temptation over there. So man, you're safe.
So I have, I guess, more of a philosophical question. So your being there and going there, because in the back of my mind I'm thinking, why hasn't Favor Africa done that already
Yeah.
themselves, right? So I think
Yeah.
you all being there gave them credibility.
The
got
reason
foot in the
why
door.
is because if a couple of Africans from Favor Africa, doesn't matter who they are, for Africans, they're traveling by themselves and they don't have white folks with them, they are very much more susceptible. You know, the reason why we almost got killed, the places where it's really dangerous is where they didn't know who we were when we were coming, and like, you know, when they were going to you know, the guys, the Malay guys that were going to kill everybody in the compound where we were, if they would have known that two Americans were there, they wouldn't have done that.
Right.
But they just didn't know. So,
Okay, this is the means of communication. You handwrite a note and you hand it to the person traveling the trail for one day, and you hand it to the messenger in the other tribe.
And they
That
run
was the
for 8
means of messages.
that's like the
And I'm
the
serious,
chief of
and
one
if you didn't
place
communicate right, you
does it to a
could
chief
get
of
killed coming into that other tribe.
So they granted us safe passage again because of
Gabriel getting there
Gabriel
earlier.
getting there earlier, not being assaulted by the lion. He gets there earlier and is able to meet with the Malay chief, because Gabriel's tribe is not a threat to the Malay. He was able to, because he's just an incredible negotiator, he's so wise, and he was able to talk to them and say, this is why the Americans are coming, and this is what they're going to be doing, and he gets them on his side. The Malay, everybody hates the Malay around here because they're just
We didn't talk about war, But every person we dealt with had had somebody killed in their
Yes.
family,
Yes.
immediate family. Every person,
Yeah.
and some of them horrible.
And a lot of them scarred from bullet wounds and stuff.
And to get married, you have to buy your wife for 30 to 50 cows. That's how you pay the dowry. So all the wars, and we ask it 50 times, all the wars are over cattle.
A lot of them, yeah.
Most of them are over cattle. Because what happens is the young men go kill the cattlemen from the other tribe, steal their cows, give the cows as a dowry to pay for their wife. I can't.
It's amazing because it's easier to steal other people's cows than it is to grow your own.
And then kidnapping is huge too. A lot of the tribes don't wash, women don't wash from their belly button down to their knees.
At least one of the tribes.
One of the tribes. And there's so many sexually transmitted diseases that a lot of women can't have babies. So what they do is they go find women with babies on trails and either kill the women and steal the kids or just steal the kids. And so take them back to their tribe and raise them as their own.
The Kachipo people are actually a very peaceful tribe.
Yeah, they are.
And it's because they're so far away, they're so isolated that nobody wants to go that far that we went to go steal their stuff.
So I guess now, since they're going back there in the next few weeks to continue the work, like to do the Bible study, what's going to keep them safe since you all are not going to be there?
The fact that Americans came and blazed a trail
The relationship is
gives the government, gives credibility with the government and protection that the government now knows that the Kachipo people are on our radar. And we went through the right channels, and we went there, and it has a sense of importance because Americans came there, went all of this effort to do this, and the fact that we got to go on the news and the media to talk about that, it just gives such more credibility. Everything that happened, and that's why my focus on the trip was on leaders, because the leaders are the ones that have authority. And if you can build relationships with leaders, and government leaders especially, man, they've got a chance. They've got a chance not because of our trip, they got a chance because of Jesus. And if we can do all these other things to get Jesus there, and that's the thing that Dave's going to share on Sunday.
I was going to say, you guys should say that.
Yeah, because Jesus is the answer. You know, we told the story of America. You know, one of the things they would ask sometimes about America. And we'd say the reason why, guys, is because a couple hundred years ago in America, a bunch of people got saved. It's called the First Great Awakening. And out of that group of people that changed America, those early leaders that ended up becoming the new nation, and with the Declaration of Independence and with the Constitution, these were newly saved people because of the Great Awakening, and God was the foundation, and it's foundational in our culture, but we have walked away. So here we are, we have this great nation, and you know, if you're not careful, they'll grab your phone, won't they? They'll start looking through pictures. And, you know, I many times had to take my phone back because I didn't want them to see my house or how much stuff that we had. David was very careful not to give them his email address because it's his company's website. And they can see the kind of wealth that we come from and stuff like that. And it's because they know America. Everybody knows America because of Hollywood, because of all the things. And so they're asking, you know, they're the newest country ever made.
2011.
They're the youngest country in the world. And they've designed everything in their government to be like America as much as they can. And the thing they want more than anything is God. Now remember, they were Sudan, and they rebelled in 2011 and won the war against Sudan so that they could be South Sudan.
They didn't want to be Muslims. The Muslims,
the Arabs, they hated, and they enslaved them. And so they threw off, that's the only time in history a country has rebelled against an Arab nation and won. And so they rebelled and started, now they all spoke Arabic. And so they said, we don't want to be like them, we're going to make English the language of the nation, the official language of the nation. 2 years ago when I was there, hardly anybody spoke English. This year when I was there, lots of people spoke English. So they're really trying to do that, but what they've identified is that America's key, the root, the foundation is Jesus. And so that's why all of them are wanting Bibles. They're all wanting to hear about Jesus. Guys, you know, I quoted the verse when I sent my quick email back to tell you all that I was safe. You know, the verse in Proverbs that says that it's a wise son or a foolish son does not gather when the harvest is plentiful. I want to be a wise son. And one of the reasons why we think God has brought us to the Kachipo people and not maybe, in Bhutan is because the Kachipo people and the people in South Sudan are hungry. They want to know Jesus. They're craving Jesus. They're craving the Bible. They know that you get God and everything. Seek the Lord with all your heart, lean not on your understanding, all your ways acknowledge Him. He directs your path. Love the Lord and seek Him and desire Him, and He'll give you the desire of your heart. So it's first. Jesus said my scripture is leaving me that seek first the kingdom of God, His righteousness, and all these things will be added to you as well. So they really take this literally, that's the beginning, and it is the beginning, and that's the thing that we kept sharing with them, and they agree 100%. I mean, we're talking to leaders, Simon.
The chief and them, they want a church first before anything else, before school, before anything else. So
because it starts with that.
That's awesome.
So how in the world can we say no to that? It's crazy. It really is. Good question.
Hey, tell the story about the lady on the airplane in a Muslim country.
Oh yeah. So I'm with a Ugandan and sitting next to her on the plane as we're flying from Ethiopia to Uganda, and she's a Ugandan, and we started talking, and I had my Bible. I was doing my notes, and she asked me. She said, "I see your Bible. Are you a Christian?" And I said, "Yes, I am. Are you?" And she said, "Yes, I am." And she said, "What kind of Christian are you?" I thought, man, that's a loaded question. I said, actually, I said, I'm at a church and we don't have a denomination. And so what kind of Christian are you? I was really trying to explore what she meant by the question. And she said, I am, I asked her, I said, are you Catholic? And she said, no. And I said, are you Episcopalian? I knew kind of the categories of Christians that they had in Uganda. And she said, no, I am a born-again Protestant. Isn't that what she said?
Yeah.
I'm a born-again Protestant. I said, so am I. I said, I'm a born-again Protestant. And so we started talking. And I said, well, where are you flying from? Because it's very rare for not wealthy people to be on a plane from Uganda. There's not many Ugandans on the plane going to Uganda. It's really weird. And so I knew that. And I said, why are you here? She said, it's hard to find jobs in Uganda. So I've been working for Arabs in Jordan and in Saudi Arabia. And I said, really? I said, tell me about that. What do you do? And she said, I'm a maid and I'm a, what was it she said? She used another word, not maid. It was servant, something like that. But she basically raises her kids, cleans her house, fixes the food, do all that kind of stuff. She's an indentured servant, and she lives there for like 6 months, and they pay her. She gets to, and I said, well, what's that like? Are they nice to you? She said, oh no, they're not nice at all. And I said, well, tell me about that. And she said, well, I said, how often do you eat? I get 1 meal a day. And I said, well, do they mistreat you? And she said, sometimes. And she's very matter of fact, very gentle, very soft spoken. And I said, well, tell me about how they mistreat you. And she said, well, they caught me reading my Bible, and I went to jail. And she said, and it was very terrible. And she said, but I came back from jail, and they told me never to read my Bible again, but I've got it on my phone. She smiled real big. It's like, these people.
Wow.
It's just crazy. So she makes money for 6 months and then brings it home, helps. She's got a little girl. It's just unbelievable. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
In 2 weeks, I saw 5 white people.
Yeah.
Including you three?
No.
Well, besides us.
Well, 2 of them were Chinese, but it was that, I mean, it was crazy.
Asian. What else, guys? Anything else?
Oh my God.
Thanks for your patience with us.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, I love hearing the stories.
Drinking.
You can talk
If you're going to look for animals, there's hardly any animals over there.
So what I need to do is do my did not apply.
Oh, yeah.
So this is kind of fun. We were, the whole time we were
There's
talking
one we
about,
still didn't remember that we talked about.
we were talking about, here's if you want to go on a trip like this, you need not apply if, and I've got a list. Here we go. You ready? These are just funny. They're true. You need not apply if you're a germaphobe, if you can't run 6 miles in 60 minutes. Like, seriously.
Yeah,
Yeah.
You need to be able to run 6 miles in 60 minutes. If you can't,
you're hurting.
you can't do what we did. I mean, I'm a runner, and walking's tough, man. And I mean, you know, David's been doing like this, this core strength thing. This like what would you call it?
Suzanne Summers.
I don't know if you remember the kicker from UT, Carlos Revez, but this guy's got like a six-pack like crazy. He worked me over and trained me and kept me alive.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah.
So he did his like core strength, crazy hard workout. I'm running all the time. Mike, I don't know, Mike probably, he was the one that was most serious about being prepared physically because it was tough, man.
I mean, I hike, we hike a lot. I mean, we live outdoors now for the most part, so we're a lot. And
But hiking in America is,
I did not
Let's take a
plan
break.
on 120 miles.
We usually stay on trails, so.
yeah.
Which, funny story, by the way, I went to Fleet Feet to get new, and I told the whole story.
Yeah.
And she said, you went how long again? And I told her, and she said, why did you just throw these boots away? And I said, as my pastor told me not to, because they're in good shape.
They're finally broken in. You need not apply if you can't poop in the woods. You need not apply if you are organized and schedule oriented.
That was very hard.
Because I'm going to tell you right now, everything changes every day. You can't predict anything. And if you ask them, what we're going to do today, whatever they tell you is a lie.
They'll change it.
It's not true. It won't happen. You need not apply if you can't handle the unexpected. You need not apply if you can't eat difficult foods. And I put a few down here. Very bony fish out of the Nile.
Oh, gosh.
Goat. Plain corn. Things you can't recognize. Things you can't see. Because how many times do we eat in the dark and we don't even know what we're eating?
Yep.
Like they give you a plate, you can't see anything, and you start eating whatever it is on that plate. I mean, it's just like, oh my gosh. You know, dried gazelle, you know, rancid meat. I mean, all this. You need not apply if you can't tough it out when you're uncomfortable, and what it means is hot, or when you're sick, or when you have diarrhea, or when you're tired. You know?
Yeah, we got along, guys. That's
Oh.
a miracle. I mean, I'm just saying, you know, if you've ever been on a trip for a few days with somebody, there's usually conflict, but we didn't have any.
I'll just tell you why, because these two guys are tough, and they didn't complain, and that's, nobody complained, and it was man, we're just getting through, and it was just a great thing.
Yeah, uncomfortable is the key. I got uncomfortable on the plane to Chicago. I didn't get comfortable until I got off the plane. So almost 3 weeks straight of uncomfortable.
Oh, man.
You need not apply if you can't overcome the emotional effect of seeing suffering.
Yeah, it's tough.
Because I'm gonna tell you something. You know, I've been on many mission trips, so I'm a little more calloused about it. This guy right here's got a big heart. And seeing suffering, we had this kid, we didn't show the picture, but we had this orphan kid that would come and stay. His feet are infested with jiggers. It's like little feet that you see a kid, his were twice the size, and there's just...
He walked on his heels.
He walked on his heels, and there's scar tissue. His feet were just covered in scars. He didn't even have any toenails that you could see. You know, just, it's awful. And I'm telling you, man, for these two guys, it was crushing. And when you see hurt like that, when you see poverty like that, and it's stuff that can be solved, you know, it's stuff that's not, it crushes you, and you have to be able to get past that. And this is the hard thing, because you know, you have this philosophical struggle going on, this theological struggle, because Jesus was there to heal the sick. And they just struggle with this, because, you know, what are we here for? You know, we should be we should be helping these people. We should be you should be, the widows and the orphans and all of these things. And the hard thing is to get your eyes off of that immediate pain and suffering that they're going through in order to think down the road, no, we're here because we've got to be able to start a church so that they can help the suffering. They can then, Jesus through them is what needs to happen, not a bunch of Americans coming and saving the day. Because it's hard, it is. And the next one is this, you need not apply if you can't resist giving your stuff to needy people. Because one of the big mistakes Americans from the white person, the only white person they've ever seen, they think every white person they see from then on is going to give them stuff. You just created a beggar. And it's a terrible thing, because now they see you not as the person bearing good news, they see you as the person coming to give them stuff. And we just shared American disease with them. That's not good. And it's hard because, gosh, we got so much stuff. You feel guilty all the time. The whole time you're there.
Our backpacks had more stuff
than anybody else.
Worth than anybody in any tribe we went to.
We had 3 sets of clothes. We had 2 sets of clothes more than most people did. And we got it on our back. And they're carrying it for us sometimes. And that's hard. It's hard.
And they didn't steal. The Cachipo didn't steal, which was, because those guys that took our bags, they went way ahead of us, and I was like, God, please. My passport's in that bag. I was like, oh, I want to get out of this country.
Not to mention how many $100 bills you had tucked
I
away.
had $100 bills hid everywhere. And a good place to put them is you empty a little thing of toothpaste, get all it out, rinse it out, and then roll up $100 bills and put them in toothpaste. Nobody steals your toothpaste. I had $100 bills hid everywhere on my body. Literally, I had over $500 or $600 on my body that nobody would have stolen because they couldn't find it in my belt. They couldn't find it in my
Unless
hat.
you're dead, then they're going, wow.
My tag had a $100 bill inside the tag. You couldn't see it.
Oh my God.
My pants right here had $100 right there.
If they rob you,
and I had $200 in my shoe. So if they stole my bag, I had enough money to make it out of that country.
So
they didn't take money. I'm taking bullets next time. I got 4 bullets.
You need not apply if you can't resolve conflict well. You need not apply if you can't sleep hot, damp, or in really weird places.
We're hearing buzzing of mosquitoes.
Oh.
Or bees. You heard bees the whole time. Zzz.
Yeah, because there's honey in there.
That's the background noise everywhere you're at.
You need not apply if you have fear of people bearing machine guns, knives, and weapons. You need not apply if you will struggle to see naked people a lot. You need not apply if you're very safety oriented and you can't take risks. You take risks, you're just very safety oriented.
Hall monitor.
You need not apply if you're allergic to bees, grass, peanuts, corn, or just about anything else.
If you were a hall monitor in 5th grade, you could.
This is one of the things we talk about is how many, the generation that we've got now, the millennials on down, they're allergic to everything. How many people are not going to go on mission because they've got some contrived allergic thing that they've been told by everybody in their life that they have? It's a problem. And so, that was it. But guys, we got to ask people at Providence, and in a greater way in America than the American church, to be willing to suffer and to be willing to take risks and to be willing to take the gospel. And for Providence, I know I'm talking mostly leaders here. We got to encourage people at Providence to say, I'm willing. I'm willing. And God will do great things. God does great things when we attempt great things for God. That's when He does great things, is when we're obedient.
We don't attempt anything that requires faith.
Yeah, that's right.
Carol, as I watched her, you got to realize this woman was the head of the nurses in a big hospital. So she's raised her 3 kids. Her husband abandoned her. She done her, divorced her, or whatever. So she gives up being a grandmother you know, when she probably had enough money to retire or whatever, and she goes and leaves everything. And she's trying to build the biggest radio tower in all of the nation and put it on a hill with no machinery, put it on this mountain. She said, God will provide, don't worry. It'll happen. We're going to trust it. I mean, we didn't even tell you. Norway, what was the country that's given her this whole compound?
Yeah, one of the
Norwegians, the Norwegians or somebody is giving her a whole refugee compound
in the northwestern part of South Sudan.
For her to minister out of.
So they've got another house of prayer and another center in the northwestern part near the country of Chad. And
so these are Norwegian Christians?
Norwegian, it's a government organization, and they said, we're leaving, we're out of here, it's too dangerous.
Oh, so they were using this space.
But we've got this great compound. Wow. Who would like to have it? And she makes a case for it, and they give it to her. Crazy.
So.
Anything else, y'all? And then we'll shut this down. It's after 10.
But the great thing is, if you get an opportunity to go to somebody like around Carol, like she's one of the most dynamic Christians I've ever been around, it will challenge your faith like you've never believed. It will stir your faith. You're going to the school of faith, you might say, the house of prayer and the school of faith, because you see the great things she believes about God, trusts God, and she sees God do them. And it stirs everybody's faith, and it's amazing.
They talk about miracles there, and at first I was very uncomfortable. And they sing about miracles there, and I was very uncomfortable. I'm thinking, man, this is like getting crazy-matic. It's getting crazy-matic. That was when I was there 2 years ago. But then I realized that because they're on the edge of danger every day, and because they're so walking by faith, not by sight all the time, that there's miracles happening all the time, and they're quick to give credit to God for these things. And it's beautiful. And one of the reasons why we today in America don't give credit to God, because we don't need God. We don't need Him to help us. We've got it all figured out. We've got all the safety, we've got all the comfort, we've got all the needs. You know, we go to the store and there's food. We went a couple of days where we didn't know if we were going to eat, you know. And God's good, and He provides, and it's just.
Y'all didn't pack food? I wanted to ask you that.
Yeah, we packed food. We packed like protein bars.
We packed enough bars. We could have lived on the bars.
Mountain stuff where you just have to warm some water. Like I wondered that and how you would cook that.
We actually ran out of food.
No, we didn't do anything you had to cook.
Okay.
We did.
I mean,
we did
there's
like
no
protein
animals.
bars.
There's no animals. There's no fish. I mean, I'm talking wild game. I'm just saying.
We took protein bars so that we could eat one protein bar a day and make it. So we took enough to just survive.
You were so
food.
I probably lost 15 pounds. I probably lost 15 to 20 pounds.
We didn't want to take anything that was heavy. So we couldn't take things that were already like normal food. You had to take dry stuff and stuff you didn't have to cook. So it's just easy stuff. Huh?
We bought some bars that were like dust, and they had how many? 30 or 20.
It's a crazy amount of calories in it, you know. They were like the military. I can't remember.
It was a massive amount of calories in this little bar, but it was like eating dust.
It's like eating sawdust. But here's the thing: the big thing that really stressed all of us out was water.
Yeah.
We were so freaking scared of not having enough water.
And water.
It's on your mind all the time, because you know, on 2 days, we went for 2 days hiking, and we saw 2 places where you can get water. And it was
still nasty.
And they were nasty. And we're sitting there going, where's the water? You know, these guys, these African guys they're not drinking the thing.
I gotta tell this story. We're coming back, and the 5 natives are in front of us. They get up to this, we're coming up this mountain, and it's just
This
rock.
is the picture where
we're laid out, we're about to die. There's these rocks, and there's a little few holes in some of them, big enough for water to set in. Just nasty algae or mud or whatever. And that's the water hole, because they know that's one of the water holes. So what do? They just take off all their clothes.
Which wasn't much.
Which wasn't much. And they're in there just taking a bath in there. They're taking a bath, and then they have some rubber shoes, like UNICEF had something given them, and they're covered in mud because it's so muddy. And so they're cleaning their muddy shoes naked right there, cleaning their muddy shoes.
And we're talking about these pools are a gallon.
Yeah, and then when they get done, then they take the plastic shoes and get at water and then they start drinking out of it and handing it to everybody.
This is slimy, gross.
It's like, well, let's drink first and then take a bath and then let's clean our
Mr.
shoes.
Aqua Clear
I
water.
was like,
You drank it, Dave?
no, trust me, I was waking at the upper Boma because I had a well.
Listen, one of the reasons why our packs were so heavy is because we were so scared of not having enough water. We just packed as much water as
We were thirsty as could be, and then we get back to the very camp. And I open up my bag. Oh my gosh, I forgot we had 2 more
We had
bottles.
2. We had 3 liters of water.
And we were thirsty. We were dying.
And this poor African
And that poor
carried
African
3
had
liters of
10
water.
pounds more water he had to carry. I was like, well, enjoy while here you go.
I was so paranoid I wouldn't get rid of water, so I filled up the bladder in my backpack and forgot
Oh man, yeah.
until we're coming through customs, getting on the airplane, and they're like,
We kept running while he kept getting pulled over every time we had a security
every time.
search.
And I forgot totally that I had 2 liters of water in the
his
bladder
backpack.
in my backpack, and so every time they start taking stuff
You
out
were
of
asking,
my
why is
backpack,
my backpack so heavy?
I didn't think about it at all, and
Oh,
until we just got lucky that Chad had lined up a plane. We had a long layover before we got back on the plane in Chicago. We got there at like 8 a.m. and weren't supposed to leave till like 2 p.m.
Oh, yeah.
and get here at like 4 or 5 in the afternoon. So as soon as we got off the plane, David and I were ahead, and then David went to the restroom, and Chad was nowhere to be found. I stood there for like 15 minutes waiting, and then finally he calls me and he's like, "Hey, you guys gotta go get a ticket. We're leaving in like 30 minutes." And so we're hustling to the other side of the airport, and sure enough, I get nabbed, and they just took everything out of
Took
my
15
backpack.
or 20 minutes.
And they're already going. Dave actually stopped and was waiting on me. And the lady goes, "What is in the middle of your backpack?" And I was like, "Oh." And I said, "It's a water bladder." And she said, "A water bladder." And so we went back and forth, and finally she said, "You can't take that on the plane." I said, "I know, just keep it." She said, No, I need to give it back to you." So she just took her sweet time going and emptying it and saying hi to everybody on the way back. It's like Chad said, I kept my cool the whole until immigration.
He was about to snap. You know, almost
He almost lost it in Chicago.
It was one of those moments I was like, please. But yeah, I said, "Lady, I'm gonna miss my flight if you don't give me this water." And so I ran through Chicago Airport. My feet are destroyed, so I've got these shoes, but I couldn't put the back straps on because my heels were torn up. So I'm flopping through like I'm wearing clown shoes. And then I've got my backpack over one shoulder, a water bladder with a 4-foot cord hanging on, dragging behind me, and I'm just trying to get all this stuff through the airport. So lesson learned. Take a lot of water, but get rid of the water before you get on the plane.
I appreciate all y'all being here. One thing Carol had a great emphasis, and as she led us off to go on the mission, her comment was to the Great Commission is a co-mission, and that means the mission we cooperate together, and it takes a lot of people to do the mission. And so I just want to thank every one of y'all for all your support, all your prayers, all your behind-the-scenes things that probably none of us have seen, because every one of y'all have invested time and money and effort and prayer, and so we couldn't have done what we done.
Yeah.
We were a mission team, but there's a lot of people involved, so thank y'all so much, and especially our wives. We appreciate y'all, and my wife did a wonderful job, and y'all did a wonderful job, so thank y'all so much.
Thanks for praying for the wives, too.
Yeah, thank you.
It was necessary.
All right, y'all.
Okay.